Good evening. I apologize. It's 6:34. Our executive ran a little bit late, so my apologies to everyone for waiting. We are actually going to continue our executive towards the end of the meeting so that we don't keep everyone waiting. If we could start with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Thank you everyone for coming this evening. The first thing that we are going to do is set the agenda as presented. And I assume, Ms. Fitzler, that the agenda that we have is the most current.
Work agenda, entire thing. Printed one in front of you is the correct ones. Or
Okay.
the electronic one online is correct.
Okay, but the one in front of us is the complete agenda. Yes, okay. Anything to add to the agenda, Mr. Kramer?
No, we do not have any agenda at this time.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of setting the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The agenda is set. We'll first start with district recognition, the recognition of the Goshen County School District #1 Teacher of the Year, Cheryl Trimble from Compass Academy. Oh, sure. I'm going to apologize to everybody. So my son has a baseball game tonight. I will be leaving the meeting early. That's why I'm dressed to go to a baseball game as opposed to the board meeting. So I apologize. Ms. Trimble, would you come forward?
Our district transition program that offers services for 18 to 21-year-old population who may need some extra support with employment skills, independent living skills. They also learn about community service by packing phone for folks, backpacks for the Goshen County kids, not just our school district, but Valley Christian, couple of daycares. So they pack a lot of backpacks every week, over 350. One of the students who is a Compass Academy student who actually sent in a nomination to help me receive Rookie Teacher of the Year is here tonight. This is EJ Haas. You can please come up here for a minute. A great example of all the students at Compass follow their individual path to success. Your BJ is actually working at the library. So we're pretty excited about that. So it's an honor to watch them all of their path and have success. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kramer, just briefly, could you educate us on how that process works for?
Yep. So what we do is we have a nomination process in which Teacher of the Year is nominated, and we kind of did it a little differently this year because we had found through the interview process that it was kind of almost like a job interview, whereas most of our teachers who are nominated, many of the times feel talking about themselves in that capacity, even though they do such a wonderful job. It was a real struggle to try to promote themselves. So the way that we changed that is we had nominations available to those in the community, and we put that on Facebook and social media. And so after that nomination was received, then we asked if that teacher would be interested in pursuing the process, because once they're Goshen County Teacher of the Year, they enter into the pool for Wyoming Teacher of the Year. And so that's another step in that process. In addition to that, they write a letter and kind of a biography about themselves. And so I had a chance to read Cheryl's and found out all sorts of information about her background and things that were very interesting. But in addition, they have their administrator write a recommendation letter and then also a student. And so EJ was the student who wrote his nomination letter and did a wonderful job talking about why Cheryl was certainly deserving of Teacher of the Year. And so that was the process, and we were able to surprise Cheryl at the last few days of the school and go down to her room and award her Teacher of the Year.
That's awesome. Congratulations again. And we got to learn more about the program, which is nice to highlight that. They don't, I agree.
Good.
I will tell you, the first time I asked about it was seeing all of the graduates that were going on to the Compass Academy. That's the first time I'd really heard about it. So I appreciate you bringing that to light for everyone. All right, so the next thing we'll move on to is the committee reports by board members. We'll start with the District Policy Committee. Does anyone from the District Policy Committee want to give a brief report on what?
Madam,
Yes, ma'am. That's okay. The agenda is made public, so they're listed. Thank you.
okay, it was a long meeting. Got 2.5, 3 hours.
I appreciate that committee's work. It's a lot of work and you guys meet frequently. Anyone else from the policy committee? Okay. DAC, District Activity Advisory Council. Anyone want to give a report on that? Trustee Hager or Trustee Alexander? Okay.
All right. We went over the Sportsman Summit that they're going to be bringing up. That is grades 9 through 12, and they will hold it at the college. It'll be on August 22nd, I believe, is the plan anyway. They're going to have a keynote speaker, some breakout sessions. They'll get back together and have a few other speakers, and looks like they'll be getting together and having some pizza together and everything like that. So that'll be.
Trustee Alexander, who is that made available to?
It is all of the kids in the district, I believe, everybody. They would mind, even if you're not in sports and everything, I'm sure you can still participate in it.
Awesome.
And it's good for everybody. I don't know if parents would be allowed or not, but it's for sportsmanship is what they're going to be working on.
Great.
So, we went over the Southeast Handbook and we could review it, so everybody's in sync on it. Discussed summer employment for the weight room. We discussed about a few events that are happening during the week and how it sometimes interferes with our 4-day week because it takes the kids away from more of their or classes and stuff like that. I think one of them mentioned was like golf sometimes happens during the week, so we have to work around that, make sure the kids get all their assignments and everything, get that done. I don't know. That's pretty much it that I have down anyway.
Great. Thank you. I do apologize to the administrators. We did bump the handbooks until next month. We already have a 10-page agenda, and so thought that could be the best option. So to allow the board enough time to read through things. Next is principal reports on Ames Web and STAR data. Do you get to decide who goes first?
Yep. And they should have that copy of that document. And actually, I had board copies too, but let me go grab those here momentarily. I think in you want to just make not button back of that. We'll start off with THS and Mr. Van Tilburg.
Good evening.
I think you do have to hit the power on the mic there.
It says it's on. Test.
Okay, there we go. We got you.
I'll scoot over. So for the sake of time, I just want to focus on our proficiency rates from fall to spring for both reading and math. And if you take a look at our reading numbers for ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th and 12th grade, you'll see nice growth throughout the year. Our ninth graders kind of flattened out a little bit. But the other thing I want to focus on, and I'll get into this a little bit, is the numbers not tested. We worked really hard on our testing culture. My first test that I went through was STAR at THS. I discovered that, especially with the senior class, we played a game of hide and seek with me. So trying to get them to get tested was tough. And if you take a look at our numbers in the spring, we only had 6 students in the whole school, about 320 that didn't get tested. So that was huge compared to the fall. And our winter numbers weren't bad either for not tested, but it did go down, and we're going to continue to work on that. I was telling Mr. Gilchrist, my plan for the fall is to pull in every class into, it won't be the auditorium because we're remodeling it, but somewhere in the building, and we're going to make a competition out of STAR and come up with some sort of a reward for that to continue to try to get the participation. As Mr. Gilchrist and I were discussing, if we don't have great participation, it really skews the numbers and what are kids really learning. And that's what we're after, is to see what do they really know. And we appealed to them this spring before the Y-Top and STAR, and came at them with the same thing. We want your best effort. Whatever that is, we'll take it, but we need to get your best. And so we felt like we got that for the most part in the springtime with our reading. And if you take a look at ninth grade, you see nice growth across the board with that as well. 11th grade had good growth. 12th grade, not bad. So as a whole, the growth was pretty good for reading across the school year. If you scroll across and take a look at math, that was a little more up and down across the classes. But again, you'll see ninth grade kind of flat for the year. 10th grade, little up, little down. And 11th grade actually had pretty good growth, and 12th grade, not bad from the fall. Again, the numbers for testing in the spring were pretty good. All but 6 students got tested with our STAR. So again, the objective for us is to continue to work on our testing culture to get kids to A, take it, and B, take it seriously. And those are our big challenges that we face, I believe, probably across the district. From talking to Corey a little bit, I think he's had some of the same problems, but it's been fun to watch the growth of the kids. We did see, and these numbers are preliminary, but we did see some pretty good growth with our kids on the Y-Top, and compared to last year, really good growth. So, we want to continue to build on that, but it's a process, and we're just going to continue to focus on the culture and try to make it better and more competitive, because I like to compete. So it makes it fun for me. Any questions? I know we're short on time, but okay.
One of the things I'm just going to cover just so the board has the knowledge on this. When you see these percentages here, those are the percent of students that scored above the 50th percentile on the STAR assessment. So 50% of ninth graders in the area of reading scored above the 50th percentile, and that's where we've established proficiency. That typically also has a correlation to scoring proficient on the Y-Top. And so that's kind of what we're using as an indicator, because we take that 3 times a year. We take the Y-Top once in the spring, and then also the ACT once in the spring of their junior year. There also are reports available for our principals where they correlate their probable score on the ACT based on their STAR assessment. And so all of these data points were being used to formulate plans for students in regards to academics and intervention and those types of things. And then we established the goal this past year, and this shows the percentage of students that increased their proficiency score. So for instance, if I scored in the 30th percentile, not 30%, but the 30th percentile as a student, and when I took it in the spring, I scored in the 31st percentile, I'm included in this percent of students that met that goal, not necessarily scoring above the 50th percentile. So that's where you see school district goal reading, school district goal math.
I do want to add one thing. Mr. Kramer brought up interventions, and that's something we're going to be actually offering this year and actually assigning kids to in math and ELA and science based largely on either YTOP or STAR. And, I really want to encourage you guys as you hear people talk about it, because it's going to be new. The idea is to try to strengthen skill for students that they're going to be ready to leave our building, ready to go out into the workforce, military, or into college and be ready to go. And when you look at these numbers, MTSS would tell us that those should be more like 80% proficient, not 50 or 55 or 60. So we have a lot of work to do. And with that comes our intervention classes. If we can catch kids up and get them to that professional level, that's huge for them. It's going to be huge for us as a school, because ultimately that's why we should be there, is to get kids to be proficient so they can be successful when they leave our buildings. So thanks for filling in the gaps for me.
And Mr. Van Tilburg, do you
Yes.
feel as though you have adequate interventions to help increase those percentages?
Our plan this year is to use a program called Ed Minim, which is what PRS uses. There's a lot of good research that shows that as kids use those for interventions, and it's all a platform, that they get a lot of success over a period of time. And our intervention classes will look like a semester long. So if a student comes in, for example, what we looked at was below basic on YTOP or urgently needing interventions on STAR. Those are students that we're going to try to plug into one intervention class a semester. I don't want a student taking more than one, because that'll take away an elective. And I want them to come to school to be able to, go to the shop or go to ag or go to, wood shop or whatever, or Spanish. I don't want to take away too much, but at the same time, we have a number of students that are not proficient in both ELA and math. And so to me, if it's my child, I want them to be proficient when they leave and have the skills they need to be successful. So we got a lot of work to do, but we're excited to kick off this year with it. And it'll be a little different schedule for some kids, but if a parent doesn't want their child in there, I just want an opportunity to explain why we're going to do it and hopefully convince them to try it, and I think we'll see growth. I know we will, at the end of each semester. So,
Great, thank you.
yep, thanks.
Mr. Gilchrist, present Lingle-Fort Laramie High School.
I won't just say ditto, but ditto. I mean, we're struggling with a lot of the same stuff. If you look at our data, one of the things we're struggling with, when I talked to you in the winter about our test taking culture and dug into that, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But this data has got to be valuable for us. And if you go through our data and you look at our ninth grade in reading, 62% in the winter, then 47, and then 47 again. You go through and you see our 11th grade, 58 to 57 to 61, you see some growth there. Does that necessarily translate into what we're seeing from them in the ACT? No. And that gives me a little bit of struggle with this test. Now, we've got to, as Mr. Kramer talked about, there are corollaries. We've got to find the value in this test. And when I say that includes myself, that includes my teachers, not just our students. One of the things we did at the end of the year, we had the opportunity to meet in our buildings to go over this benchmark data, and I chose to have my math teachers, my ELA teachers, my career and tech teachers present their data to their colleagues instead of me going over the data. And what I found was that there was a very hyper focus on YTOP. We weren't necessarily there to even talk about YTOP, yet that's where the conversation went to. And I started thinking about that. And as you guys are well aware, for half a decade, my middle school was not meeting expectations. We were bottom 20 school in the state of Wyoming on YTOP. And when you're beat over the head with that repeatedly, that gets your attention. That causes you to become hyper-focused. And my directive when I took over as the high school, middle school principal was, we've got to fix this. So for years, that was our focus. And we did well. We finally drug ourselves out of the bottom of that pit last year, and that was a fantastic thing. So I created that culture, and now I've got to correct that culture. And part of the correction for that culture is finding the corollary between this data, because this gives us 3 places that we can check YTOP. YTOP, we get a check once a year. That doesn't do us a lot of good as we're preparing to get ready for the spring YTOP. If we can correlate this data and we can check our fall data and say, okay, we know that they're going to do this in the fall, we can intervene on that. Like Mr. Van Tilburg said, we're going to be putting in intervention classes. We've hired an intervention teacher for the secondary and start intervening on those. And I've got to make that connection because I've never met with a board member around STAR data. I've never been interviewed by the newspaper about how poor our STAR data was, but I've done all of those things for YTOP. And we've got to find that same importance. And I think that's the goal, is to get the connection. In the meantime, we're certainly going to go with bribes and we're going to have competitions and we're going to try to get that. But to get the true intrinsic value and to get the staff to believe in it, we've got to find that connection and be able to use that effectively. And so that's what we're going to be working on at the middle school and high school level. Our middle school data is going to look very similar to our high school data. It's going to be all over the place, dipping, going from 80% to 42%. We instruct better than that. We did not cause them to get 40% less proficient. But again, it's finding that connection, and having my teachers do the data dive and present to us brought that very clearly into focus for me. And again, it's the culture I created. That's one of the things that I came in saying, this is the most important thing and we have to fix this. And so we don't have to back up from that, but we've got to find the connection to all the assessments that we're doing, because there is value in all of them. And we've got to get staff to believe that. And we've got to get students to believe that, because this data that you're seeing up here, we've got to get that to be important to everybody so that we can actually act on. Because right now, with the data you're seeing, it will take us weeks to sort through this, looking at different pieces of data to determine who we should actually be intervening on. Are we intervening on a kid that actually is struggling with skill? Or are we intervening on a kid that didn't take the test seriously? We've got to get past that so that we can actually be effective in intervening. And I want to see, when we get, if you go down to the bottom, when you see the growth goals, like this represents, they've got to grow 2 points to get here. Those numbers should be well north of 50%. And I think if we can get the buy-in to students and staff taking that test seriously, we would see those numbers, but we're not. And the number is what it is. So that's work on our part that we've got to come up with. But these numbers right here have got to go up. Those simply doesn't show growth. And again, our data is what our data is. We've just got to fix it. So any questions?
I'm going to have you do middle school and elementary while you're up there.
Sure. And again, the middle school, the difference between, we are the only school in the district that does map testing. We went with NWEA. We purchased it as part of our school improvement grant because we're in YTOP purgatory, so we have access to funds. We will be going back to STAR next year. There were some good things that came out of maps that we like some of the reports, but they were not significant enough for us determined to keep going and spending that money. Because blessedly, hopefully, we are no longer going to have access to those funds because we are no longer in YTOP jail at the middle school level. So that would be a wonderful thing to lose that money. And you'll never, ever hear me say that ever again. So again, you kind of see the typical trend. You saw this with THS, you saw this with my high school. Initial numbers and math. And the interesting thing about this is when we were doing a deep dive 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I started out, math was identified as our weakest area. So we spent a lot of time at the building level working on math, scaffolding, instruction, vertically aligning, looking for holes in the curriculum. And I think you can see the results of that improvement in math, and this kind of indicates that. But again, you have my 7th grade going from 75 to 61%. Did they truly drop that much? Again, it's a culture thing, and we're going to have to adjust for that. One of the things that we talked about is at the middle school level, somehow walking across our bus loop into the middle school door, we lose about 40% of our proficiency walking that 25 yards. And we've got to figure out something to connect there. So one of the things we've talked about doing, and hopefully it drives some of the one of the biggest connections we could have is STAR across the upper elementary grade levels through the middle school, and starting to have those conversations, those vertical conversations from 3rd through 8th grade, and start identifying like what are we not doing when kids are 70% proficient in 5th grade, yet when they take the Y-top or take STAR in 6th grade, they end up in the 40% proficient. What happened? What are we missing? What are we not preparing them for? And so that's one of the conversations at the middle school level. And I think that's one of the things that's going to drive some of the emphasis on the STAR, because if we schedule those meetings intentionally, scaffolding across the grade levels and across buildings, that brings value to that. And then we can have that connection. And then if we can correlate that again to Y-top, we can see where the holes are and what we're doing. Because we saw the exact same thing this year. 5th grade, we were in the 50 and 60% proficient, down in the 30s for Y-top in 6th grade. So somewhere we lost half of them. What happened? So that'll be a big conversation, and you'll see that data here coming up in coming months. But we need this data to reflect this, because this data allows us to have impact on it every 3 months. And so we got to get some value into that. And again, you see some of these things, like, again, the growth. This getting closer, but again, if these aren't in the 70 and 80%, what are we've got to do a better job, and we got to make this data valuable. Again, this is maps, which is different. And one of the logistical things that we ran into, and the onus is on me as well for this. When we scheduled the spring, we waited till Y-top was over to test map and STAR. Little less problematic for STAR, because the typical language arts test in STAR runs between 45 and 60 minutes. Maps, somewhere between 90 and 2 hours. So from a logistics standpoint, a scheduling standpoint, when you shrunk your window to essentially 4 or 5 school days at the end of the window, we put ourselves in a pretty big pickle when it came to middle school maps. Lesson learned. STAR will make the logistics of that work out way better, because we can take it during a class period in a comfortable environment. And again, hopefully incentivize it a little bit to make it valuable to the students. Any questions on the middle school data? Again, this will be similar. The corollary between map and STARs is very similar. So it's not like we're starting over with a baseline going to STAR. Map will give us this data will correlate very well to the STAR data that we produce next year. So we won't see that disconnect.
One thing to remember too is STAR maps versus Y-top. STAR and maps are benchmark assessments, which meaning they're setting benchmarks in the fall, winter, spring. And Y-top is a summative assessment. So that means that it's taken at the end of that content area to determine if there was access or, excuse me, achievement of proficiency at that time. And so that was the biggest piece there.
And a big part of there are interim tests with the Y-top, but historically they have not been the same type of test or even the same type of questions that we see on the summative. So trying to use those interims as benchmarks has not been successful. It has, to date, it has not correlated for us. Our interim data does not match what we see in the summative, both directions. Sometimes our interims say, hey, we're going to knock it out of the water and we perform poorly, and vice versa. This data is very consistent. It's norm reference, and it's giving us a constant point of reference that we can use consistently. Again, we just got to find that corollary between those. Now the elementary data, pretty proud of this data. You can see a lot of growth. You see like kindergarten reading proficiencies going from 25% to 83%. First grade, 35 to 79%. Seeing these numbers getting very close to that 80% is telling us that we're getting very close to getting what we need out of our tier 1 instruction. When that gets closer, when these numbers over here get to that 80% mark, we're getting really close to figuring out what our initial first instruction needs to be. So getting those numbers above 80% or as close to 80% as we can get that's good and shows, every one of my grade levels except for fifth grade, met their growth, 20% growth for the school year on Ames Web. So kindergarten through fourth grade in reading met that. Go across to math, you see 100%, 94%. We are really close. Eureka Math, that has helped us immensely. Developing that program, still continue to vertically align, make sure we're doing the right things. But the structure and the rigor of that curriculum has gotten us really close to, we've almost nailed that tier one piece. And is evidence in this. And every one of my grade levels in math met their district growth goal. Over 20%. Fifth grade did not, but we met the district goal of being over 95% proficient. So we had 12 students, K-5 at LFL, not proficient in math across the entire school. So feel like that was a very successful year at the LFL Elementary. And we've done a lot of work in the intervention. Literacy intervention has been, we've very much focused on the K1, K1-2 area for the last couple of years, and we're starting to see the benefits of that going up. So any questions about the elementary data? All right, thank you.
Mr. Gilchrist, just a
Yep.
second. I'm sorry. I didn't want to jump in if anybody had questions about the elementary data. So I fully appreciate that it's hard for you to stand here and give us good news and bad news, right? But I appreciate that you are standing here and owning that some of these numbers aren't where we want them to be. I see this as a partnership with the board and administration and the superintendent and so forth to work towards improvement. You had mentioned that the culture needs to change, and that's, I mean, that's obvious when you've got 31 kids not testing right in the winter and so forth.
Literally holding diplomas behind my back.
Right.
From
And I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. Can you discuss for us, not working in education, like what's that timeline look like for you to change that culture and to see actual, evidence-based, where you can say, and part of that, Mr. Gilchrist, is so that we as a board have reasonable and realistic expectations, right? I'm not expecting you to come in next semester and be like, boom, we fixed it, we're all good now, right?
That's certainly my hope, but
Right.
not how it's going to work.
So you can kind of discuss that for us. And then also my understanding is that this is going to be a pretty common thing now, right, Mr. Kramer, for the administrators to come and discuss this with us so that we can be a good partner with administration. So how long do you think the culture is going to take to change realistically? And then the other thing is, Mr. Gilchrist, what can we as a board do to help support you in making those changes?
Well, based on my experience with what we did with White Top, getting the middle school to get where they are, because Mr. Kramer and I have had these conversations. It's not about the skill of the teachers that I've got in that middle school. Like it was not about that. There are a lot of moving parts to try to identify. I feel like this is a little bit different because honestly, we have two separate test taking cultures in my building. That became glaringly obvious in May when we had these meetings. I've got a Y-top testing culture that all in, all hands on deck. We will do whatever we can to make this happen. And then we have our STAR and MAPS testing culture where they don't see the value. And those are two very different things. If I can make that connection, help my staff make the connection, because that's where it's got to start. And it's not just the students. It's also my staff seeing value in that and conveying that. I mean, we are very bad at hiding our faces. And when we turn on that test, you know whether it's important to that teacher or not, just by how they react and what they're doing. So it's getting that shift. And based on what we did with Y-top and how we had to put what Y-top very quickly went from just being something we did at the end of the year and our data stunk, moving on. It was about a 4 or 5 year transition to get there. Now, the work and effort by year 1 or 2 was certainly there, but that cascade effect to get it to build up to where you're seeing the results took 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
I think the turnaround on this could be much quicker. Just because we do have that anchor point of Y-top and what we've done. And if we can make that connection, I think that speeds up the process quite a bit. So I do think that, as far as what the board can do, listen to this, hold us accountable. I mean, this is the first time we've had to do this. And this is transition down to my staff. I'm having them now present their data to, instead of me just presenting it to them, they've got to present to their peers about their data and what they're doing. They've got a sense of accountability now too. And they also know that I've got to come before you and show what work we've done. And I think that sense of accountability and your understanding of what it means and what it is huge. So that when we ask for money, you give it to us. No, I'm kidding.
I appreciate that.
No. And there's a lot of, Mr. Van Tober alluded to the interventions. You get into the secondary level, interventions are incredibly challenging because you can create an intervention second period with the best teacher in the world, but if it's opposite of American history, which is a graduation class, I'm not pulling a kid out of a graduation class to put him into an intervention. So trying to create environments, we're adding 2 flex classes with one in the afternoon that's going to be solely around intervention and flex. We're not going to put ACT prep, leader and me stuff in that. It's going to be only for that. So it's kind of being able to have the flexibility to do what we need to do. You know, and as far as we went through salary relations, we had the opportunity to hire an interventionist that's going to free up sometimes. So different things like that certainly help out. But I think mostly is you guys understanding what this data means and what impact it has on us. I mean, YTOP is going to be the golden standard because our county is going to be in the paper. Like we're going to be reported to the state. That is the golden standard. But this data right here, understanding how that can help us and your understanding of that supports us as well and holding us accountable to this. So,
Mr. Gilchrist.
Mhm.
And this is a question for Mr. Van Tilburg as well, if you have some information that you would add to it. But you mentioned that some of your staff don't see the value in it. Have any of them explained to you or been able to share with you why they don't see the value in it?
In the conversations that we've had, and we had several, especially after we had that presentation of the data, that they're not seeing the connection. They think it's just another thing that we're doing to report back to the school board. And we've had conversations about how it's more important than that, but it's trying to see that connection. And of course, it was amplified at the end of the school year because we had just got done taking YTOP and everything you had going on at the end of the year. And then we crammed the window into like 4 days. And so it was kind of overwhelming. It felt like just another thing we have to do. So until we start acting on that data and consequences are not the right word, until we start valuing the data to impact our instruction, it is just another thing that we're doing. And I think they perceive that. And we, to be perfectly frank, have not acted on this data appropriately to this point. And I think that's what we've got to do now. Right now, it is simply a data point that I come and present to you and I present to them. They do, and I shouldn't say that because I do have teachers that are taking that and they're identifying strands that they're using within their classroom to create intervention groups and have kids working on very specific things that do come out of this. But it has not been nearly intentional enough. It does feel like just another thing that we're doing, and we've got to bridge that gap so it isn't just another thing that we're doing.
And one of the things too that we saw very clearly was the correlation between the spring testing on STAR and the YTOP. I mean, almost to a percentage where this percentage of students taking the STAR was the exact same percentage of students proficient on the YTOP. And so we're driving that home that this is a very good indicator of probable success on YTOP, and then YTOP being an indicator of probable success on ACT. Those things are really, really important as we get multiple times during the year to take these benchmark assessments where YTOP is one and done. Again, also with all of these assessments, one tool in the toolbox. We don't have, we have multiple tools that we have to use to analyze student success. This is one of those tools we take out of that toolbox, analyze it, use it, and then make that and make adjustments to the education of each student. No one should be greatly higher use than the other than in some situations that some carry a little bit more weight post-graduation, just like ACT does. And so we do have to place some value on that because there's significant meaning for some students with the ACT in regards to scholarships, just as there is meaning to the GPA piece too. That is just as important in receiving scholarships. But all of those are just those, again, I want to reiterate, one tool in the toolbox.
And I think a perfect example of that, and what we're talking about and the importance, is this elementary data. Ames Web is what we use for elementary. It's not STAR, but very similar. It's a norm reference test that tests specific skills, and you see the results. These kids that you're looking at in the middle school and high school took this test. Their data probably not as good as this. We have improved. We've seen gradual improvement. But in the 60s and 70s, like you've seen it. The difference is my elementary teachers have used this religiously, and it has daily impact on what they do. When we progress monitor, when we do these type of things, it is being used on a daily basis. And that's the difference between the middle school, high school, and the elementary. And trying to navigate the logistics so that it can be that's my job. That's what I've got to do. I've got to figure out how to make it that important to the middle school and high school. And I think you'll start to see these results and these corollaries to Y-top improvement and the ability to improve on Y-top throughout the year versus that snapshot at the end of the year. It's hard to intervene when you're just looking at a single point of data one time a year.
Well, I think too, with the secondary, one of the challenges, and actually this is across the country, is how does wood shop impact reading for math? And one of the things we're going to do from talking to Mr. Derby is we're going to do some training with Writing Revolution at the beginning of the year and try to attach some of that writing into our bell ringers to try to get kids to do more writing. And so there's little things that we can do to tweak the process. I think the secondary level, I agree with Corey, it's much harder to nail down some of that intervention work and make it more relevant to our students and staff. For example, at Torrington High last year, before my first year, they didn't even take STAR. I don't know why they didn't take it. So when I told everybody this fall we were going to take it, everybody looked at me like that was a foreign language. So it took a whole year to kind of get that back on the tracks and get it going down the tracks at a proper speed. But there's a lot of little things that we're going to do. Interventions is a big one that we're going to put in place, but little tweaks that we can make along the way will definitely improve student achievement. And getting better, like Corey said, at tier 1 instruction. I mean, I love instruction, and I've seen it in our building how it's going to drive and move the numbers in a positive direction, but that takes time as well. And great question about how long. Can't answer the Torrington. I don't know for sure. We're just going to keep talking about culture and keep working on it.
I appreciate the transparency and just the conversation, just to kind of keep us in the loop. So thank you.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Sorry. This actually could be addressed by anybody, but since you're up here, I was wondering if anybody thinks that Leader in Me, like as kind of a culture tool, might.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had the pleasure, Gwen, our trainer, came in and spent a day with us. And that was exactly the conversation we had. How can we connect that to what we do? And so we started talking about the portfolio work that we're going to be doing, the student goal setting that we're going to be doing, and that can be directly related to this. In fact, as we had the conversation at the middle school, high school, we are going to directly connect our STAR data to that, starting from the first benchmark in the fall. And so that was a really good connection that we made. And for us at LFL, we were kind of having a disconnect. Leader in Me was this, academics was this, and it was a very good training for us to see how those can meld and work together. And so that was very enlightening and very encouraging for us.
Great question.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gilchrist. I'm going to move to Southeast. Mr. Williams had created a great video of himself explaining all this data, and I can't get it to work. So unfortunately, technology is not, and he spent so much time to getting it right. And so we'll either show it at some point in time, but I want to present his data also this evening, and I'm going to present his data and LaGrange's data on Mr. Daly's behalf also. Mr. Daly missed his he actually made his connection, but the flight was delayed in Seattle. So he did plan to be here this evening, but unfortunately he's not able to attend. But at Southeast High School, you can see the 9th grade here in reading percentages again, proficiency as a school, 71%. Again, that spring is a little bit more difficult when we have again, I want to go back to Mr. Van Tilburg when he referenced the benchmark assessment and not doing them. This wasn't something that we did and had the emphasis and analyzation that we did this year. This was really the benchmark setting or the setting of our bar for this year for STAR, where Ames Web, we've been working with the elementary for the past 3 years and really focused on those goals. This is something that kind of is in our first year and how to illustrate the importance of this. And again, the more we use the data to drive instruction with students, the more students will take an interest also in performing at their very best. Again, this was reading, and then I'm going to move over here to math. You can see the percentages that were proficient or scoring above the 50th percentile in that area. You can then also see the percentage of students who met that goal of a 2 percentile ranks from from fall to spring, 1 between fall and winter in that percentage. And the same for reading here and the percentage increase. I'm going to scroll down to Southeast Junior High. And same here, as we have the percentages here in the spring, 7th grade scoring above 80%. That's really a highlight there in the area of reading. 7th grade then in the spring on math, above 90% of the students scoring above the 50th percentile. As a building, 73%, of course, because the junior high is the 7th and 8th grade. Goals reached. You can see where 36.67% grew in the percentiles on math, and then 55% for spring in the area of reading there.
Mr. Kramer,
Yes.
why is for reading and math 6th grade, fall and winter not recorded?
So the fall and the winter, I think it's going underneath our Ames Web, is they took the Ames Web in that time period. And so that where Southeast is a little unique because they have the junior high setting and 6th grade still in the elementary. And so that would be why there. Thanks for catching that. And then Southeast Elementary, again, this is Ames Web. And so you can see really what we're shooting for again is those 90%, which is they're really achieving there at a very high level. All grade levels, 77%, K through 5, 81% proficiency. And then we scroll over to math, 94% K through 5 proficient. And then I'm going to go up, and I want to point back to your question on Leader and Me. One of the things that Mr. Daly has really, really focused on all students at LaGrange has been goal setting. And that has made a significant impact, as he would attest to if he were presenting tonight. But you can see for the second year in a row, LaGrange, 100% proficiency. And this traditionally, prior to last year, where we've shared some data, even though there's a smaller number of students, approximately 16, there was not this level of achievement prior to the last 2 years. They have really increased the achievement levels. We're 100%, and they really celebrate it. It is a celebration when every student reaches proficiency. And you'll notice also, they're not starting with 100% proficiency in the fall. There's a lot of work being done here to get every student to proficiency by the spring. Also the same here in the area of math, 100% proficient at all grade levels. Some exciting data there. And then I'm going to also have one more that I'm going to share, and it's Torrington Middle School. And you can see again here the percentage proficiency in reading in the 50s, 56 at 6th grade, and then moving down at all grade levels, 48%. In the area of math, all grade levels 59%, with the high being in 6th grade at 66.2. Also, when we share the YTOP data in August, you'll also notice that 6th grade did some outstanding work on the YTOP also, and be exciting to share that information too. And here's how they did on the goal work. We're 57% of that 8th grade. This is where that interesting number comes across. So you have two different indicators here. You have the proficiency of reaching that 50th percentile or above, but then you also have that importance of increasing. Even if you're not proficient, you're still growing, and you're growing beyond what that typical academic growth would be. And so that's important also. And then you can see in the area of reading also at 31.7% at TMS. Now I'm going to jump back up to the elementary, and we have 3 teachers joining us via Zoom. And just because Tyler is appearing at the top, so Mr. Florshinger, I'm going to jump to Trail. If Mr. Florshinger would share his information, and as you start talking, I will scroll to your area on the screen. So go ahead.
Good evening. Meeting you here from Laramie at the Embracing Literacy Conference. Sorry I couldn't be there tonight, but I did have I will have an awesome opportunity to present with Taryn Hendricks and Kelsey Walker around our our intensive reading intervention stuff we've been doing in the district. So we'll be able to highlight some of our Goshen County stuff, which I think is pretty exciting. Starting with 3rd grade. Fall 55%, in the spring 67.0%, just a slight increase from winter. 4th grade 55 to 69.23, again a little bit of an increase from winter, and 5th grade 58 in the fall to 77.92 in the spring, which was a decent increase, in overall 56 to 71.3%. We had a lot of conversation in our staff meeting at the end of the year around that winter to spring, not necessarily a dip, but it doesn't reflect the growth from fall to winter. When I showed staff this, I was really proud of them for 2 reasons. One, I was proud of the work they've done and those percentages, but I was also proud of them because they were not happy with that small growth from winter to spring. And it wasn't like, oh darn, it was like, what do we need to do? And it was some really great conversation. So I was excited for them about that. Any questions on reading? Okay. We'll go to our math now. In 3rd grade, we started at 60% and went to 79.26. Good growth from fall to spring, but a bit of a drop from winter to spring. 4th grade 72 to 85.89. Again, good growth over the year and slight growth from winter to spring. 5th grade 67 to 81.81, a slight decrease from winter to spring, and then overall 66 to 82.27, again a slight decrease. Same conversations there. I really attest, I believe, like some of the other administrators said around our Eureka Squared math, I think that it is showing we are meeting our tier 1 obligations, or really close to it with that. So we're excited to continue with that. As far as literacy, I know that earlier in the spring, we did some training and some education around our literacy placement protocol. And my staff has really latched on to that. We only had a few months until school got over, but I think that work with the literacy coaches and being really finite around what our student needs, how do we address those, and how do we progress monitor those. I think that that's going to have an impact from our winter to spring data next year. So any questions that you guys have for me?
Thank you, Mr. Florshinger.
Okay, thank you.
Now I'll have Miss Lindsay Maxey talk about Platte River School. Or we might jump to, I'll have her come back at the end. Miss Lana Swinghome for Lincoln Elementary.
Good evening, everybody. I apologize, I'm in the car, so if it's okay to keep the video off, I would appreciate it. But if you do want to see me, I'll be have lots of background. So I just presented data in May, and so this is the same data that I presented at that point. But just to give you a quick recap, in reading, our kindergarten students, it's interesting to me that K2 came in all at 42% proficient. I don't know how those numbers worked out because we have different amounts of students in each grade level. So it was very interesting that we began proficiency at 42% in each grade level. We are looking for a 10% growth in the spring and 10% growth in the fall, making a 20% growth for the year as a first data point. Really overall, we're looking now at an 80% proficiency is what we want kids to be at the end of the year. And then pushing that into the 95% of our students being proficient in the spring. And so we're making gains towards that. Our kindergarten class, 90.76% of our students are proficient in reading based on Ames Web. In first grade, we grew from 42% of our students being proficient to 61.84%, so very close to that 20% district goal. And then in second grade, 42% of our students coming in proficient and 71.42 leaving second grade and moving over to trail with reading proficiency. So we're really excited about that. We did spend the last 2 days, we know we still have growth to achieve. So we spent the last 2 days really delving down deep into the data and each subsection of Ames Web. We've created a building goal, grade level goals, and then individual teacher goals based on our spring data. So we're going into next year with a ready to go and getting started on proficiency for students. For math, we've seen great gains. Again, Eureka Math has been a really great program and curriculum for us to use. In kindergarten, we began the year at 38% of our students proficient. We're now at 89.23. So we're moving up to that. We've hit that 80%. Now we're going to start pushing that to the 95% of our students being proficient. First grade, 57% of our kids came in proficient, leaving at 81.57. So we're at that next threshold. Now we'll be pushing towards that 95% of our kids being proficient. And in second grade, kids started out at 59% proficient and 84.52 are moving over to trail with math proficiency. So we're really excited about the work that we're doing. Of course, we have work to continue to do, but our teachers are excited and we're using the data like other elementary buildings, using that data every day to make decisions for our students. So any questions?
Thank you. And I hope you are the
Thank you.
passenger, not the driver as you're presenting there.
No, I am not driving.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we'll go back to Miss Lindsay Maxey.
Sorry about that, guys.
You're fine.
I'm going between two screens and I was trying to find the unmute button and I couldn't find it fast enough. So, so I am also out. So thank you for your graciousness in that. I'm trying to get stuff taken care of and get back to Wyoming as soon as possible because I am not enjoying the humidity right now. So let me tell you a little bit about our data. We actually use a diagnostic test with Exact Path. You heard Mr. VT speaking about that, what he is using for intervention. This is actually one of the things that we use because it has an adaptive diagnostic. With that, as you can see with our proficiency rates in reading, kind of breaking down, I'm just going to look at the all grade levels because as you heard previously, one student can skew the entire data. And with such small numbers in each cohort, it does kind of mess with the data a little bit. But looking at the reading part, you'll see that there was a slight dip in winter, and then you had an 81% proficient rate come spring. In terms of math is my subject where, of course, we have to work on it a little bit more. But it did increase from fall to winter to 62.5%. I'm proud of that, but it still needs to be better. I'm going to still push that. One of the things that we are doing in Platte River, we are looking, instead of doing the Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, we are looking at the integrated math because a lot of our students come to us where they are behind in math credits. And so with the Math 1, 2, and 3, that will allow us to kind of spiral that curriculum a little bit better. as to focusing on just the Algebra 1 or Geometry and Algebra 2. I feel like that will be a better route for us. And then finally, we also have the third diagnostic. This is one that the other schools do not do. We like to be different by design. So we also have the language arts, which focuses on the writing piece. And I'm super, super proud of these. The score with having a 93.75% proficiency rate for students. There's work to be done. I feel like that we are getting better. One of the things that we implemented this past semester was setting goals, and that is part of that leader of me, like what you heard speak about previously. So we're going to implement that the entire year instead of just focusing on the last semester. And then we're just going to keep pushing and trying to do our best. And if you hear my Southern accent just kicking in a little bit more today, it is because I'm around a bunch of Southerners. So hopefully you have a translator. But that's PRS's data. I'm proud of our team. I feel like we're doing a great job. I think we all agree that, we're going to continue striving for more and more. I am proud of our juniors. They worked hard because they dealt with not only dealing with diagnostics, they dealt with the ACT as well, which is kind of a stressful test for these guys. We had a student that scored a 25 on the ACT, which I gave her a big high five. But overall, again, I'm really proud of our kids. They're doing well. We're going to keep pushing and keep striving, and keep going from there. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Thank you for joining us from the South. Appreciate it.
Well, I figure you might need a little Southern Belle today.
Right. Yep, that's what I think of you. You're absolutely right. Southern Belle. Yep.
Thank you, guys.
All right, the last portion that I'm going to present on is the district reading. So this is Ames Web. We'll go all the way back to fall of 2020, and you'll see this is the percentage again that was scored proficient in the fall of 2020. As I kind of scroll over to this side, as I referenced, we do fall, winter, spring. This year, the districts had 75% of our students scoring proficient. That is the highest percentage that we've had score proficient. So that's a celebration. We've continually raised that bar of students scoring at that higher percentile. 88% of our kindergartners at the spring benchmark scored in the area of proficiency. And so that's getting to that point of where our tier 1 instruction is really going to be useful, and we can get into those tiers and actually create some interventions for those to get to that 95% of proficiency. When I scroll down then to district math, same types of things, really not specifically setting that goal as we have in the last 3 years, but now in the last 3 years, I've really closely monitored this. And then a really big celebration here at the end in the district, 86.47% of our students. Again, that is the highest percentage of students that we had scoring proficient. Also, I'll have some really great news to share in August when we talk about the YTOP. We did have our highest percentage of students scoring proficient on YTOP as a district also that we've ever had. So some really exciting data coming out of there. STAR reading again. I like the color coding, and I have a whole graph of how I kind of color code these, but this one's very simplified. If there was a drop, it was red. If there was a drop more than 10%, it was red. If there was a drop, it was yellow. This spring, you can see, a balance between that increase at each grade level. This is really our starting point. This is really where we're setting those bars and setting those expectations. So there's district reading, and then STAR math as a district. We had 60% of our students with STAR score proficiency. So that is our data for STAR and Ames Web information that we wanted to share in June. As I referenced earlier, we'll be sharing YTOP and ACT data later at the end of the summer. Any questions?
It's a lot of information.
Yes. Well, that's a great question. Thank you. So for Ames Web, it's set at 40%, the 40th percentile. And then as for STAR, it's 50th percentile. Now, and for YTOP, it's 40th percentile. So the interesting things when we talk, this is where it can easily get kind of construed of why 50th percentile, why 40th percentile. So where we get that information is the nationally norm referenced, is where we go and look at that bell curve when we look at the national percentile and where that indicator is going to indicate probable success or proficiency. And so each individual state on their own assessment also sets a different proficiency. So YTOP, Wyoming set 40th percentile. There are other states who set their state assessment at the 35th or 32nd. And so each state has kind of set their own goals related to that amount. We have discussed at the Ames Web math to possibly increasing that to the 50th percentile for that, because what we're finding is if a student scores proficient on Ames Web, what we're wanting to see, what our end of year assessment, our summative assessment is the YTOP, we want to show probable success. So if we have a student indicating they're proficient in fall, winter, and spring on the Ames Web, we want to make sure that that's a good indicator of where they're going to score in the spring on the YTOP. And so that's where that correlation is important. And we're finding we're kind of at that higher level in Ames Web math of where a higher percentage of our student is able to achieve that 40th percentile. And then it's time to raise that next step or goal and setting it at the 50th percentile.
Any other questions? Okay. Then I guess we move on to public comment. Do we have any slips for public comment? Okay. This might be against the rules, and if it is, somebody can tell me, but would the board be willing to make a motion, if it requires a motion, to switch the order of our board discussion and superintendent's report? The only reason being Chief Johnson has sat here for almost 2 hours, and I feel really bad having him do that just to sit through another report. Would the board mind if we switch those two agenda items? Keep in mind, there's no action being taken on either agenda item. Does that require a formal motion?
Yeah, why don't we have a motion to amend the agenda to reflect that?
Would anybody be willing to make a motion to switch those two agenda items, 6 and 7?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we go ahead and proceed with switching those agenda items.
Thank you, Trustee Goulart. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of switching the two agenda items between the superintendent's report and board discussion concerning the concealed carry, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Mr. Kramer, how would you like to start this discussion?
So I'm just going to kind of give a little bit of background related to new legislation that was recently passed that will go into effect July 1, which requires us, it has us having a discussion regarding concealed carry. Concealed carry legislation currently that will go into effect July 1 will allow individuals with a concealed carry permit to take the firearm and the concealed carry responsibility into schools and other areas that have been kind of zones in which those were not allowed. So it really requires us to take a look at a possibility of them creating it's called a policy, but in this case, it is a rule. So there's different requirements for a rule making as opposed to a policy. Policies require 2 readings. A rule requires a 45-day period in which we illustrate an intent to vote on a rule. And so I laid out the timeline for that, which would be a discussion for the board on the proposed firearms policy that was part of your packet here, and then also sent to board members individually earlier in the month. And then also a policy, this is a policy that would be going onto the policy committee or a review by the board, is our visitors to school, which is kind of also related to concealed carry. So what in this process of rulemaking, what has come across is that as school boards have an ability to set specific rules around concealed carry in regards to training for employees or volunteers. And so when we look at the CKA firearms policy, this is what would be considered a draft and the rules for requirements for training for current employees or future employees and volunteers, and what those expectations for training. And we're building it out. We took the Wyoming School Board Association shared a model policy and then left a number of areas blank where working with local law enforcement was a requirement to take a look at what trainings might be appropriate to the individual district. And fortunately for us in Goshen County, Chief Johnson was willing to partner with us as I shared with him the policy framework and asked him to kind of outline what would be some appropriate training language that we would add to a policy in which he as law enforcement official would recommend or feel comfortable with. And I don't want to actually insert any language into how he's going to share that information because I know with his background and his ability to talk about it is going to be far more eloquent than I am relating to what he added to that. So I'm actually going to just turn it over to Chief Johnson to talk about specifically some of the language that you saw or added to that policy for information for the board, if that's all right with you, Chief Johnson.
And please, Chief, so that they can hear you over Zoom. Chief, too, before you get started, I just want to make a couple of things very clear. So for purposes of the board, we're not taking any action tonight. This is just informational. The 45-day period that Mr. Kramer mentioned, that allows us to receive public feedback. That's not tonight. We will set specific dates and manners in which the public can give us feedback. The only piece, if I understand the legislation correctly, is that the board takes action on is whether or not we require additional training of the employees and or volunteers. There's individuals that are encompassed within that definition. So I just want to make sure that that's really clear. Thank you so much for spending the time. I know you're not required to do this and we really, really appreciate it. But thank you for your time and effort that you've put into this and kind of helping to educate the board and the community as to what it is we can look at as far as training and so forth.
It's my pleasure to help in any way that I can. Keeping kids safe is pretty much the most important thing we do. And thank you for adjusting the agenda.
Sorry about that, Chief.
It's okay.
We went a little long.
So there's really a lot that goes into this. And I guess I again want to make it clear that I'm really not in a position of authority with this. It's just recommendations that I've made based on experience and perspective that I have from a few years of doing this. So that's really what I have to offer. I think the first thing that I would want to touch on is that the statute lays out some pretty clear delineations. And the two that really strike me as important as you look at how you might want to implement a policy or a rule are first that there's a differentiation between members of the public that are visiting at a school with a concealed carry permit and staff members or however else volunteers folks would be described as having an affiliation with the school. For me, the way I look at that and evaluate that, I have 17 folks who I have the pleasure of serving and who serve our community every day. Every one of those folks carries a firearm as part of their duties. And so I sleep well at night feeling like the folks that I'm personally and professionally liable for are well trained and competent in their skills with a firearm. So that was kind of the mindset that I took with this. And then obviously anyone who enters a school with a concealed carry permit can do so lawfully. And there's no oversight from the school or from law enforcement or anyone else related to that. And then the final piece that I would kind of offer for clarification is that as you read the statute, it lays out some pretty clear expectations in terms of the hours of training. So the school board has the essential opportunity to say, either you don't provide any training and any requirements, or you just stick with the concealed carry permit. I'm sorry, I did not say that correctly. Either you provide a specific amount of training requirement, or you set no standard, and whatever the concealed carry standard is now is your standard. And those training requirements were for 16 hours of live fire handgun training, and also 8 hours of scenario training for that first year that a person would be interested in carrying concealed as a member of staff or in other affiliation with the district. And then it does specifically require 12 hours each year of follow-up instruction. And so we really just sat down and tried to look at these folks would be almost responding with police officers. I mean, if you're looking at risk and threat, you look at the level of the threat and the amount of time that you're exposed to it. And so people who are working in a school have at least as much exposure as a law enforcement officer would have if we're talking about a worst case scenario. So if those folks are going to be armed and responding to keep kids safe, we would want to provide a level of training so that our police officers could join with them and have consistent training that we receive in order to support and work together to keep our school and our kids safe. We broke that 16 hours out into looking at advanced firearm safety. Certainly basic firearm safety that you would receive for any sort of firearms instruction or hunting privileges is great. But when you're talking about operating a firearm in a crowded building full of innocent people, we feel like some advanced firearms training is worthwhile, some advanced firearm safety training is worthwhile. Marksmanship principles, again, if you're looking at defending yourself or other people in a crowded environment, that is a really important skill to have. We talk about tactical shooting concepts, and that's something that we also train police officers on in terms of how do you move, how do you shoot and move, how do you stop moving appropriately, how do you clear corners, all of those types of things so that people can be competent in responding to difficult situations. There's also a lot of different strategies you can use that would be successful, and some that would be pretty unsuccessful. And then we look at live fire training and proficiency. We went back and forth a little bit on how you measure that. The Wyoming Post standards are actually quite reasonable, and so we feel like that's probably a good metric to use. If you're able to provide a level of proficiency where you can pass a Wyoming post qualification course, we will train you to that level and get you qualified. And I would be very comfortable setting money in the bottom of the board if I had at that point. The person would be competent to operate in a difficult circumstance. And then we looked at the 8 hours of scenario training. I'll give a number of you folks, and perhaps you folks in the crowd have seen what we do on an annual basis for active threat training in our schools. And we would really just like to replicate that for staff members and other associates at the school. How they're being able to bring in this dinner. I guess it's a lot. 8 hours of snare training is quite a bit. That is what the staff requires. And I think we can do a lot for folks that are looking to keep themselves and kids safe, to make that goal. To be upfront, stress training is the best training we can provide. I have training a lot of police officers, a fair number of folks in schools. It's easy to think that things will go well until bad things start to happen. And then that stress and immune response can cause folks to behave in a way that they didn't anticipate. And our goal in doing those scenarios is to provide enough scenario training so that those folks have pathways in their brain that they can go to for a successful response rather than going into a gun violence, fight or flight situation where they're really not competent to assist. There's a lot of clear research and a lot of clear data on that shows that more times we put people into very realistic situations and help them to succeed, they're a lot more likely to succeed when something like that actually happens. The total hour refresher, again, required by statute, it's just a slightly shorter version. of the live fire center training that we offer. I talked a little bit there about instructor and trainer qualifications. Mr. Grimmett, so we kind of doing the draft that have been provided that.
Yeah, School Board Association.
As we looked at that, it was very broad. And I'll be frank, firearms and tactics training has become quite fashionable, if you will, over the last 15 years or so. And I don't know that every provider of that training provides it at a level that as law enforcement partners would be excited about staying next to that person and engaging in a really difficult situation. And so we try to look at some of the best practices, national standards you see out there. Really, if you look at the National Rifle Association instructor certification, that's a really good standard. And if you look at a person who's certified by Wyoming Post to instruct people for firearms training, that's a great standard. And then we also looked at having a minimum of 5 years of experience in active law enforcement role or military assignment that includes a demonstrated advanced proficiency with aliens and responsibility for preparing for and responding to an active threat of public safety. That's a lot of words. But what that means is that it can be no different than a new service officers who is a member of our agency but has no experience in administrative firearms, providing training to staff for firearms. And not every member of the military has that sort of advanced training. Some of them are incredibly advanced and incredibly competent. So we would want to reserve that training standard for those folks that do have that advanced level of firearms proficiency. And then the same thing for active threat instruction related to the scenarios. We try to look at national standards and best practices. There again are a lot of different training programs that are out there. If you look at some of the nationally recognized training, the FLEXI training, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, provides an outstanding active shooter response. TEACS, Texas, I'm sorry, terrible with the acronyms, Texas A&M, the extension service, I believe it is, teaches alert, which we're active to move that's advanced law enforcement emergency response training. We're actually going this could be up to our certification on that. And then National Tactical Officers Association. Those are just really high level, high quality training folks that will excellent instruction and confident, so that if you include those disciplines, provide your training, you're going to get a good result. So I'll talk about my part if you have the answer to questions.
Chief, I have a question. So someone who that's not an employee or a volunteer goes and gets a concealed carry, what is the standard or the level of training that they have to show that they have, or is there any sort of training they have to show that they have?
There is, but it's not expressed. Under the statute, it has some training qualifications, but basically they present to the law enforcement official a certificate from a trainer stating that they've completed the weapons simulation course, and that they're safe to possess and operate with a firearm. There's not a standard for proficiency, and I don't mean to dismiss that because frankly, I don't think we have a terrible requirement for folks to have concealed carry permit. But I would say that in my assessment is probably not a standard I'd be comfortable with. If I were employing folks that were going to be working in possessing a firearm and planning for a response, I would not want that to be the standard for the folks that I was involved. If the meeting has done them, it's a great thing that so I'm very comfortable with that. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions can I answer?
Thank you, Chief.
I didn't think you were going to get off that easy, Chief, so I appreciate it.
So one of the things that we talked about is that, of course, there's no vote tonight There's also another opportunity in July for public comment for us to hear that will also have other opportunities for comment, whether they be written comments. One of the pieces that comes out is a notice or intent, which is kind of deceiving because really what the notice or intent of adopting a rule is your vote. What you're giving the public is saying, here's what we might be doing in August, and giving that and posting that in the newspaper and saying, these are the dates, because it's going to be the July board meeting that we would then hear public comment. We can also make changes to any of this language also in that process. But what we would want to put out there is the generalization of potential rules that would be in place. And then at the August board meeting, the board would then take action on that potential rule. Are there any other additional questions? Also too, in relation to visitors to schools, we added that policy is there, that has not been changed, that has not been altered. But that is our current policy that we have in place. And one of the things that I think is important to kind of just take a look at and have knowledge of is relating to non-employees or non-volunteers, still being able to, with a concealed carry permit, bring firearms into the school as a visitor. And at any point in time, that visitor policy covers school time. We don't have a policy related to after school events, extracurricular activities, or those types of things. Again, which upon a concealed carry permit can take the firearm into a extracurricular activity.
I have one question. I haven't read this policy word for word, but is there any language in it that stipulates if someone does get the permit that it's public knowledge?
So the only thing that actually within that policy relates to employees or volunteers and going through the training, and the requirement for if you fall into that category, then going through that specific training. So there's nothing there that regarding notification. Correct. That's correct. By outlining the specifics to the training, there is then knowledge that we are going to then be working in conjunction with the Toronto Police Department through that training process. And so Chief Johnson would have knowledge of who would be going through that training process upon adoption of these specific rules. If there were the decision to not go with any rules at all, there would be no knowledge of or ability for us to know if any employee had a concealed carry, as that is permit basis completely separate from the school district.
Mr. Kramer?
I know yours is a little hot for some reason. I was gonna say, try that.
I don't know if that's just employee extra. Maybe Christmas can still carry.
I'm going to actually let Marcy answer that because we are under a different organization, and she can answer that because we've had that discussion. So thank you for asking that question.
Later in the agenda, you're going to see the renewal of school risk retention. And school risk retention is a pool exclusively made up of school districts in the state of Wyoming. Through school risk retention, there's nothing additional that needs to happen for concealed carry. There's no additional charges, there's no additional riders, and things would stay status quo.
Could that potentially change over years? But we know for next year that's the case. Is there a possibility, depending upon riders for other organizations? Do those rules, typically I'm sure they stay the same, but at any point in time, an insurance carrier probably could say, we want to add this, or is that improbable?
There always is the opportunity.
Okay.
And I mean, we just have to be aware of that. With school risk retention, Gallagher Bassett is the service provider. They're out of Chicago, and they are in all conversation. They've been dedicated to this being a priority and making sure, you know, some of the school districts that you're referencing, they are insured by local insurance companies in their district, that those entities are having to charge additional dollars, add riders, or you know, go to the process of an entity being dropped.
So I've probably got about 3 or 4. We'll try to eat this cow one steak at a time. Cost of the training. Do we have a figure yet for, and I'm sorry, Chief, maybe I should ask while you were at the podium. Do we have a figure yet on cost? And number 2, since we are going to place this additional obligation on the staff to go through this training, are we not responsible for taking care of that cost and not putting that burden on the staff members?
So, a great question. The line that I've taken on this is if we are needed, to help make sure our schools are safe, we will do whatever it takes to make that happen. I have some very competent trainers that we will dedicate to this. I'm not overburdened with cash, so please don't take that as I have an excess fund problem, because I don't. But if cost is an issue, we will find a way that we can work. I can't incur additional costs. I would need, the district or staff to participate in expenses for admission, expenses for training supplies, expenses for walking rounds, for the supervision handguns. There would be hard costs that I could not cover with the assistance with, but the best way I can say this, the money is secondary for us. The safety of the kids is primary. I can see some school safety, then we can easily justify investing in school safety as an agency. The job. That's the best answer I can provide.
When Chief Johnson and I have had discussions around this, one of the things that we've partnered with in the past has been those active threat simulations. And then we partnered in sharing some of the costs for those and everything else. And it would be very similar to that and that cooperation that we've had. But it wouldn't be a cost in which there would not be the ability for the superintendent, based on policy set for cost expenditures, to be determined and shared and then expended by the superintendent.
Yeah, I do believe, unless I'm mistaken, but I know we have a representative here in the house. I believe section, the statute 21-3-135 does provide for almost $500,000 for training. In the state of Wyoming, that's not.
We have not heard a lot of information on how to access those funds, like some of the other funds that have been out there. So I'm hoping that we would then be able to get information either from that entity who would be the caretaker of those funds, whether that be the Wyoming Department of Education or who that may be at the process to recoup some of the costs. But yes, that would certainly be something we would access if available. I would assumption, but I'm sometimes assumptions that I make are not always accurate in the entity that they might be coming from. But yeah, if there was funds available out there, we would certainly be wanting to access those.
On our end of it, we would certainly not turn away reimbursement. Not going to sit down and training the staff.
And then, Mr. Kramer, to the trying to flesh out some of the definitions in the policy. Volunteer. for starters, are we going to consider that the board members are going to be called volunteers?
So in the past, we have not had board members complete a volunteer form. And so we've used that as our benchmark for setting on who are volunteers. And so in the past, we've not set that, so board members would not be, but those individuals who would be going on field trips, be regularly occurring visitors to help students within the classroom on a daily basis, fill out a volunteer form. And then what I do is I go and do a modified background check on those individuals, even before anything related to concealed carry or anything like that. So if there was a requirement for a volunteer form to be filled out, they would fall under that category and definition.
And so now, do we require those forms? Because I know on this list it includes vendors. Mention some examples about those that deliver food supplies or materials. How are we just still trying to flesh out what volunteer means?
Again, I think the standard for me would be set as if we've required a volunteer form in the past, then we would still stay with that standard. We have not required vendors to be a part of that for volunteer.
So just to be clear, what we're reading is a generic WSBA produced policy, so we're gonna have to tighten it up.
Yes, and again, I would, especially on the volunteer piece, pertaining to what we have defined volunteer as, is if you are referring, or being required to fill out a form for a background check, you would be considered a volunteer. If you're not under that auspice or you're not employed by the school district, you would not fall under this policy.
My understanding, trustee Goulart, is this is a starting place. Yeah.
But I like the idea to edit that, so I can, now I see exactly where you're talking about. And really, as I'm looking at it, I would say, I'm just reading through the volunteer piece here. Hopefully you're able to access or see that too. I think up until this highlighted piece would be the only piece that we currently do not require a form to be filled out with those individuals, and so that would be eliminated. Otherwise, the others, we have required a volunteer form to participate. So thank you for pointing that out.
And I have a quick question, and this is something I think we need to consider as we flesh out this policy or this rule and figure out what we'll do. If the trainer decides that someone isn't able to meet the qualifications, doesn't pass, how will that be handled, or I mean, we might not know yet, but I think we need to consider
we've
that.
talked about that, actually. Yep.
Don't need to be sick. But we're kind of putting our signature along the line of the folks that are doing this. And the qualification course that's required, it is not a high bar to meet. And so if someone were not able to meet that qualification course work, or if needs to be building who has a bad stress response. But we have had folks in scenarios that did things that when they were under stress, they really unsafe. And so that's something we would can direct with training, or if they're not able to meet certification or, the standard of qualification required, we would not be able to sign on to say that they were not very good with the policy. How the district handles that is very much up to them. But much like I have police officers that serve in this community that I'm personally professionally liable for, we're encouraging some level of liability by saying we're providing training for kind of stuff. So they're not able to meet some reasonable standards, that would not be a signature at the moment.
So following state statute, are we legally allowed to say that we will not allow them to carry in our buildings if they do not meet those qualifications?
As I read it, yes, but I'm certainly not your attorney.
Sure. Sorry to you into being one.
Just put you on the spot right there.
I guess that was to everyone in the room, not, I was just looking at you. specifically.
So in my opinion, which that's not your term, in my opinion, I think that the district has the needs of the board, which is require the training, require the successful completion of the training. Or two, the board of that consent that wrong. So I believe you do, but certainly smarter heads than me can consider that important.
Thank you.
Anything else on that, Mr. Kramer?
No, I don't believe so. So we'll have further discussion in July at our July board meeting.
I appreciate the conversation and I really appreciate Chief Johnson, your time and coming in to discuss it with us. The conversation will continue. All right, we will move on to superintendent's report.
All right, so I'm gonna share my screen again here.
Wonder if Ms. Maxey knows that she's been on the screen like full and center the whole time.
That's why I tried to share earlier, so she'd get a break. Our data in relation to average daily membership related to April and May of the previous year. You've seen this data a number of times before. I'm just going to scroll down because it was very, very similar relating to the schools and not very much difference between April and May. You will notice that here in April, we were at 1,566.15 students in April, and in May we had 1,567.09, which is actually really encouraging considering May is sometimes our most difficult month for attendance. So to have an increase on our ADM does reflect that we had a higher percentage of students attending and either or enrolled in May. So that is an encouraging number there. The next one that I'm going to share is district staffing and the openings that we still have within the district. Okay. Yeah. Well, that wasn't going to work. So we did have 4 positions open within the district, and I can't, let me see if I can maximize. No, it's not going to let me. So we have positions within the district, a math position at THS, a band position at THS, TMS, and a 4th grade elementary position at Lingle-Fort Laramie that we have remaining open.
Have we filled our coaching positions in the district for the?
We have not completed all coaching vacancies, but we have filled a couple within coaching for THS recently. Southeast, I do not know where we're at on one of their coaching openings in relation to boys basketball.
Thank you.
But I think they are still moving forward with some summer activities also. And the last one that I have is just information on supplemental student accident insurance. Again, we've made available yeah, if you want to speak, yeah, go right ahead. I'll let you do it. You're kind of more familiar, but I'm going to speak to it a little bit too because I utilize it also.
This item simply shares the fact that the district will be making available through K&K voluntary student accident insurance. This is at no cost to the district. It's part of the registration packet that provides the opportunities for families to purchase this insurance for their students.
And It is something that individually parents can access, and based on the risk, there are also different levels based on the number of sports that they participate in. And of course, football is the highest cost one if you include that in your insurance. But it is something too that is above and beyond and is helpful for parents who have kids who are accident prone.
Mr. Kramer,
Known as boys.
I'm sorry to even ask questions because I know we're running long, but for those positions that are still open, like, is there like a hard deadline to where we can't continue to do this so that we can get something will happen during the school?
So Plan B is kind of what you're referring to. We've had numerous discussions, especially in the math piece, about Plan B option. And I know Mr. Derby and Mr. Van Tilburg and Holly have been kind of generating those and also talking to different entities that might assist us. And, nothing is as good as having a teacher full-time on campus, but there's some other options that are going to be available to us that we'll kind of utilize. We're also trying to work with as many different entities too in a partnership, if that might be available, whether it be a halftime at one entity and a halftime with us. We're open to any and all ideas, especially in those areas. And the challenging one has been the band one, where we've had two different individuals. One individual offered and accepted, and then another individual offered, went through the interview process and decided not to follow through. And so that one's been a challenge too. And that's one of those that is really difficult because we talk about having that advance notice and the importance of those early retirements. And that was one where we did have plenty of time. We thought we were sitting really in a good place. We had an individual in that, and then sometimes situations occur where difficulties within life change, and then we have to make adjustments. But thank you for asking that question. Please ask questions regardless of time. Do not think that I'm trying to rush anybody through those. The questions are important.
Any other questions pertaining to the superintendent's reports? Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull any of the items listed under the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull 8.10 for discussion.
Okay, what'd you say? Okay. Any others? Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda minus 8.10.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, except for 8.10, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, motion carries. 8.10. Is there a motion to approve purchasing it exceeding $5,000 to renew licensing with Tribron for line-wise monitor and class-wise in the amount of $7,684 out of general funds for technology?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
No, not at all.
Trustee Goulart?
So I had to do some research to even find out what this was. Some minor questions, because this is a 24/7 hour 24/7 surveillance program attached to the devices that we are assigning to our students.
Correct.
Okay. So the question would be, does that include access to the camera, the microphone? I know, reading from the website, it includes whatever they're typing into the screen, where they are, if they're on the internet, basically anything that's on their screen.
Correct. It takes a screenshot is what it will do.
So I just wanted to make sure that we had a strong policy in place to make sure that there were no backdoors where settings could be changed or anything that would allow that kind of intrusion into someone's home with a device that comes from school.
Great question. There the access that I've had, and the principals can attest to this, we get notifications almost daily because it will flag low-level concerns to very high-level concerns. There have been times when I've gotten a phone call at 4 a.m. From someone in Australia telling me, you have a student who said on their chat, I want to kill myself. Those are the ones that I want to know about immediately because they also go to law enforcement. They also then assist us in providing an intervention as soon as possible to prevent the possibility of a tragedy with our students, and also access in it's that level of access to pornography or anything else that they might be searching. Because even in a search engine, if those certain words are posted, it provides an alert. And then all that is available then is I have to log on, and then it will show me on the screen or the screenshot. It'll take a screenshot of that and then provide that information. There's no sound, there's no other additional information, and it also only goes by the student's username. So there have been situations where we have had students log in under their sibling. And then with the help of the parent in discussion and things while they were at home, because the first contact is the parent. Hey, are you aware of this? Do you know what's going on? Well, no, I know Billy didn't do anything, but his brother had his computer and we're going to have a conversation about this. And so that's happened a number of times also. Really what it's that next line of things that we know through social media. And it also, in addition to this, it provides parents the access to accounts in which they can add that to a child's cell phone also. And it's also would notify them, and we are then taken out of that as the middleman on their own personal devices. But there have been a number of families who have said, we're going to sign up for this because it's part of the schools. And then we are completely separated from that because they've signed up as a different entity.
Just for context, if I can, Trustee Goulart, and for those sitting out in the audience, to know what we're talking about, this is student protection software that looks for signs of self-harm, school violence, abuse, behavior, those types of things that can be harmful for students. So that's why the conversation went dark so quickly, in just talking about those subjects.
And ironically enough, I was in a meeting today that was a very challenging meeting in regards to the notes that I was taking on there. I got back to my office and I had an email that flagged myself for the notes I was taking in there relating to self-harm and things. And I was taking notes about relating to a student that we were in a meeting about and things. And so it also then will flag staff if there's concerns also. Now, it again has different levels. We don't receive a phone call for everyone. Today's it didn't have context, so it just sends an email. It doesn't flag it at a higher level. But at certain levels, there's either the phone call or other additional contacts to make sure somebody has that option. It also there's similarities into a separate program at the state level on Safe to Tell. So Safe to Tell is where we have a reporting system that isn't attached necessarily to computers, but individuals then contacting Safe to Tell, and then Safe to Tell contacting us. And so in the context reference of their ratings and line-wise ratings, they're very similar into contacting administrators. Thank you for the questions.
I have a question about the memo. So it says, in one paragraph, it says 24/7, and then the next it says during school and classroom hours.
So two different pieces. Line-wise is the piece of where there's that monitoring software. Class-wise provides administration educators the ability to view and control student computers while they're at school. So what I can see then is I have the ability, if I'm a classroom teacher and they're registered, I can then see and view the different students from my laptop, what they're all looking at live. Now, they cannot do that outside of that. Yep.
Any other questions or further discussion?
I just think that it would be beneficial to some parents. I didn't know that you could link the two. I mean, I know there's other third-party stuff you can do with your kid's cell phone. But I don't know, it just might be beneficial for parents to do, but it's not that easy for them to access. Just to make that.
We can send out a reminder also at registration again, because I think it has been a little while since we first signed up and then promoted some of those things it's always good to have that reminder. And I have not utilized this third party, this vendor for my own, but I know other ones I have access, because it is, especially in the cell phones, stark things that we see, especially even on, it's very interesting also where students who I would never expect to have certain things are flagged, and it's a good conversation to start, even at the elementary and middle school level, and some of those things that even through their chat on games with each other, just the language and the opportunity to have those positive conversations around mistakes that can be much bigger later in life related to that.
Thank you, Trustee Hager. That's a good reminder. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving 8.10, the purchase exceeding $5,000 to renew the licensing with Trebon for line-wise monitor and class-wise in the amount of $7,684, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. All right, on to old business. 9.1, consider approval of proposed revisions to District Policy 2421. This is the line and staff communication as presented on second and final reading. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Trustee Sharp.
And I know that's not completed yet. And so, I just didn't know if we could actually approve it without the discharge attached or not.
And that would be up to the board if they feel comfortable and with the language and then the addition of the chart coming at a later time, or if they feel more comfortable with approving that at the next step when that would be completed. I'm fine with that also.
When do you anticipate the organizational chart being completed?
Still a current exhibit place. There's still a chart that's in place. We just haven't updated.
So we have an existing one, it just hasn't been changed.
Right.
Okay. I think I'd be comfortable given the fact that there's an existing org chart in place. Okay, I appreciate that. Any other discussion?
How does this flow with, Madam Chair? How does this flow with the reality that we're kind of in a weird spot? Because the staff, for example, they are employees of the district, but they're also our boss because they vote for their board members. And so they're part of the electorate. They need access to their elected officials. I guess how do we walk that tightrope of if they want access to their elected officials, they need to have that as well, while maintaining the chain of command. And we've had some circumstances where we've had to maintain that. But I guess I'm wondering, are we going to discourage them from coming to their elected officials if they really feel they need to?
Do you want me to take that or you to take that?
You can add on to that. So to me, what it means is anything related to their job. And what my question also, because I find myself in the same position. Should they come to the superintendent or should they go to their building administrator first? My question is always, have you had a conversation with your building administrator? If there's significant concerns related to things that are outside of job duties, so they might be concerns related to if they were a parent. Again, might be the same thing because I might ask them, have they talked to their principal? But if there's things that are valid concerns for the organization, there are instances where going to that individual as referenced in policy, because we have policies where it says, talk to the superintendent, that would be completely appropriate. The ones that I would always first start off with is the question, have you talked to your direct supervisor about your concern?
And I want to just be really clear. So the policy says that staff must follow the communication hierarchy with regards to when they're seeking administrative or board action. But then the next sentence literally says all personnel have access to the superintendent and board and may appeal decisions up the chain. So I don't think that this policy precludes staff or employees from approaching the board. It's only when they are asking for administrative or board action be taken. Does that make sense?
And I think there was value in having that discussion, just so
Absolutely.
everybody that's here and everybody that's watching in YouTube land. That, yeah, we're not, I don't want the staff to feel like all of a sudden there's a brick wall in front of that podium that's excluding them if they feel like they need to come to it or come to us individually. Cause I mean, that's been the norm for me since I've been elected to the board, and I think we've handled it pretty well. So, that was just the concern, is make sure that we understand the verbiage doesn't take something away.
I would agree, Trustee Goulart. I think it is difficult being a board member because a lot of times you are approached with things. But I think that as long as the board is consistent with making sure that it has, he or she has spoke with the administrator and then, or the superintendent, however it may be appropriate. But again, everybody does like to be heard. And as long as we are also touching base with our superintendent and letting him know about information that has come to us individually, I think that benefits the board as well as the staff and employees. But thank you. Good discussion. Any further discussion on 2421? All right, all those in favor of approving District Policy 2421, the line and staff communication, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. 9.2 is the consideration of approval of proposed revisions to District Policy 3420, purchasing, as presented on second and final reading. May I have a motion? Thank you. May I have a second? Is there any discussion? Okay, we've discussed this one in the past. All those in favor of approving District Policy 3420 and purchasing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. 9.3, consideration of approval of proposed revisions to District Policy 6173. This is the homebound instruction as presented on second and final reading. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Whoever captured that first. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the revisions to District Policy 6173, the homebound instruction, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. 9.4, this is the consideration of approval of proposed revisions to District Policy 4330, the medical leave bank. And this one is presented on first reading. I would entertain a motion. May I have a second? Thank you. Any discussion? Pretty straightforward. All those in favor of considering the revisions to District Policy 4330, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. On to new business. 10.1, consider approval of superintendent salary for the 25-26 school year. I would entertain a motion. Change the contract days to 257. Is that the extent of your motion? Okay. You did a good job. May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? So just to be clear, that is to increase the salary by the 3% that everyone else in the district received. Benefits would stay the same, correct? And then the change in the contract days. Okay. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, that benefits part, is that correct, Mrs. Cates? Wasn't there a correction to be made there as well, or no?
No, we just might want to state that the benefits would be the same as other certified and classified staff. Benefits being retirement, insurance. The change was, when we look at other certified and classified staff, they were asked to, pay a little bit additional to their insurance. And, that would be, if your intent is for the superintendent to make the same contribution to insurance as what everyone else is making.
And that's something he historically has done.
Correct.
Okay, so just be consistent with what has been done in the past. Does that make sense? Trustee Goulart, you look perplexed.
We had a conversation in the past that I think I misunderstood the past conversation. I thought there was something we needed to correct, and I think that was probably something we did, but I understood it to be something that we needed to fix, that had not been fixed in the past.
The correction that, I had asked in talking to, some of you was the 257 days, based upon going to the 4-day school week.
And Marcy, that's the same as other current 12-month employees, correct?
Actually, when we went to the 4-day school week, teachers' days decreased by 3 days, and that in turn flowed to 12-month supervisors and administrators. And at the time, it was not reflected the same as the superintendent. And so I was asking that the superintendent have the same number of days as what everyone else is contracted for.
Maybe that's where you thought that the correction needed to take place.
Right.
Yeah. Any further discussion?
Do we need to amend the original motion?
Probably, or if Kate would be willing to restate the.
Yeah, Kate, Trustee Steinbach, do you want to restate your motion?
Staff received and the correction to the number of contract days.
Are we satisfied with that?
Covers it.
All right, with that, can I get a second of the amended motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, all of those in favor, in favor of approving the superintendent's salary as presented by Trustee Steinbach, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstain? Okay, motion carries. With that, Trustee Chairs, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you. My son is pitching, so
Take off.
I know. Thank you.
Next is item 10.2, consider approval of offering an employment agreement to Whitney George as the district social worker for the 25-26 school year. Do we have a motion?
Move.
Second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.3, consider approval of maintaining the district community eligibility provision status for the 2025-2026 school year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion?
In the agenda, it says it's for the 2025-2026 school year, but the policy that we're looking at is the dates of July 2025 to June 2025. It's a 4-year span.
I believe that it is a 4-year contract, but we have the opportunity to change it on a year-to-year basis. Am I correct in that?
Madam Vice Chair, what happens is it's a 4-year span that we're eligible for. Our ISP, which is our reimbursement rate, actually went up. And so we have a new reimbursement rate, which is higher. That means more money for the district. Consequently, we have a new agreement. We would be approving it for next year, but then if our ISP stayed the same, it would automatically renew for those 4 years through 29.
Thank you, Ms. Cates.
The other thing that I would ask is, we need a motion because this was a consider and discuss.
Thank you. So can we amend? Where are we sitting? I apologize. It's getting late and my brain is quitting working. So
if we'd amend the motion to reflect that, that'd be fine.
amend the motion to maintain the district community, isn't that the motion that's currently on the floor? Is to maintain the district community eligibility provision status.
Yes.
So how do we need to amend that?
I thought I heard somebody say so moved. I didn't hear a motion. But the recommendation is board discussion and consideration. No, we do need a motion.
Just replace the consent.
Okay, I gotcha.
Sorry.
I'm not
I'm
sure.
thoroughly confused. So if someone does understand and would like to amend the motion, please do so.
I'll amend my original motion to consider approval of maintaining the district community eligibility provision status for the 2025 to 2026 school year.
So I think,
that right?
do we need to remove the word consider? Is that where we're having the issue? So it would be to
Move to approve. Okay, thank you. Move to approve maintaining district community eligibility provision status for 2025, 2026 school year.
I apologize. We're off to a rocky start without our board chair here, guys. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah, a little bit. I have some questions about the math. For starters, just to make sure I understand, in last month's packet, we received the food service fund numbers. And our budget's we're planning to budget $450,000 into that transfer fund that we had $350,000 in this past year. There was $122,000 shown for cash reserves, but then for the upcoming fiscal year 25-26, there's just a dash there. Am I correct in assuming that we burned through that 122,000 as well, or did that 122,000 go somewhere else?
I'll let Marcy reflect that question because I know she has some data on that and those items.
If you look at page 48 with me, and this is information as of April, unfortunately, there's a 1-month lag because of the time frame of getting our bank reconciliation and our bank statements from the financial institution. In April, we had a cash balance of $80,153 in the lunch fund. What's not represented is the fact that I have a loan from general fund of $150,000. So I shared with Mr. Kramer, the 450 could be up to maybe 500,000. The other thing that I think is important to notate and to recognize is that historically, prior to COVID, the lunch fund received a transfer from the general fund. and I went back to 2015, looking at that pre-COVID, anywhere between 200,000 and 300,000 was transferred from general fund to the lunch fund. And that was based upon a normal paid, free, reduced environment, that a transfer has been very customary. The dollar amount is right now anywhere between 450 to 500,000. Ramona Moody is here with us today. She's the food service director, and she did some math based upon our increased reimbursement rate, which looks like we could receive upwards of $40,000 next year based upon additional students qualifying at a direct certification classification.
So that, how would that change it? Just to make sense of our projected budget. So if we were to get that additional 40,000, we'd still be budgeting 410,000 instead of 450, or?
Well, our hope is that participation will continue to grow. And one of the things that we look at is what participation was like this year when we ended the year versus what was it like last year. We served at the end of May 244,753 meals. That's breakfast and lunches. Last year, we served 173,360 meals. That's an increase of 71,393. The more meals that we serve, the more money we receive. However, costs continue to go up for product. So the more meals we serve, the more money that we will receive. That it really is hard. Ramona, as she purchases food, staffing has totally stayed constant. But as she purchases food, we have food costs going up as well as additional costs for additional production. The food service fund is an enterprise fund, meaning that it's operating as a business. Historically, we've had to, in order to sustain that fund, we've had to transfer money. And so what I'm sharing with you is whether we do CEP or not, there's going to be a need for a transfer. What we have here is the ability to feed all students breakfast and lunch. We don't have any students singled out, meaning that there's no kids that are pulled aside and told you don't have money in your account. We don't have staff at schools having to collect for negative balances. We don't have staff having to decision free and reduced applications. There's all of those kind of things behind the scenes that are allowing all of our kids to be treated equal and get a free breakfast and a free lunch.
Well, I guess with the number increasing, and when I read into the fact that it used to be a 40% threshold, and then COVID, because COVID is the gift that keeps on giving, they lowered the threshold to 25. It made me think of when the feds thought it'd be a great idea to lower the standards for lending, because their math never seems to work. If we're going to continue to increase the amount of money that we have to pull from the general, because even with the increased reimbursement percentages, it's barely keeping up with the cost of food. Maybe at best it's doing that. So we're never going to get ahead of this rock we're trying to push up the hill. And then couple that with, we have the reality of last month, we learned that because of the property tax reduction, we had to take a chunk out of the BOCES budget. So, and then if I'm going to compare the necessity of BOCES to, wow, it's really great that we have this food system that's easier to manage, but it's bleeding us out. It's one of those federal programs where the feds are they're not wowing me with it. And it seems like it's just going to continue to bleed us out.
Trustee Goulart, for me, it's the same, right? Like we're pulling money from the general fund with or without the CEP program. The only way to get ahead of that enterprise fund is to drastically increase the cost of meals. So we would have to remove the CEP and increase the cost of meals per student or staff or whoever is participating in our program is the only way for us to get ahead of your rock, right?
Well, but when we
The
were,
other solution?
when we were running a more managed program, and I'm gonna use that way to describe it, because I don't know how else to describe that. I mean, was there an official name for when we had a payer system or system where some students were paying and then we were covering free and reduced for children that had applications?
You're referencing the school nutrition program.
Okay,
And
yeah.
and I think that it's very important to notate, we operated 2 years through COVID where every kid received free meals. They received free meals, we received a reimbursement. Then we went back to the free, reduced, paid, the school nutrition program. With that program, in a perfect world, as trustee chairs mentioned, you would charge what was needed to break even. If we participate in the school lunch program, we cannot charge a break-even point. The feds and the state, because of us operating a school nutrition program, we can only increase 10 cents a year. So that's part of that transfer that had to happen in the past when we look at a $200,000 to $300,000 transfer. The only way that a district could be in a true break-even situation would be if the district chose to not participate in the school nutrition program. And if you choose to not participate in the school nutrition program, there's no reimbursement from the feds for meals served.
But, okay, and I'm not suggesting that we wouldn't participate in the school nutrition program. That's what we were on before, where,
I'm sharing that I think it's important for everyone to understand in July, when we would set meal prices, we can only increase our meal prices by 10 cents a year.
on the school nutrition program prior to CEP.
Correct.
Okay. But when we were on that program, so yeah, sure, we were pulling out of the general fund. Were we pulling out in this amount to keep that system going? Last year was 350. This year's going to be 450. And again, I'm not sure, I might have misunderstood, but the 122,000 that's shown on this food service fund. So that is, we've spent that as well?
We have a balance of 80,000.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so that balance is not in here, but there's a balance. So we've dipped in a little bit into the cash reserve as well. So, were we spending that kind of money out of the general to maintain the system we had before?
200 to 300,000 is our trend of what it costs to keep up a school nutrition program. When we walk through recalibration, food service is one of the components that comes up every 5 years when we walk through recalibration as districts not being adequately funded to provide the meals and the cost of providing a reimbursable meal. I mean, what Ramona has to provide for that meal to meet reimbursement rates has a lot of different components and expensive items that she has to provide that we tell the consultants that districts need money for food service, and that's one of the items that repeatedly takes the back burner. As we talk recalibration here, I intend to bring it up again, that it's something that is underfunded.
And I think the challenge too that we'd be doing is there's two pieces to that on what we'd have to speculate is we know food prices have increased, and that's part of it. And so by keeping our food service costs or the school nutrition cost of meals the same, and then still having to require the payment from those individuals, it's still probable that we would have a significant increase over the 200 to 300,000 that we had in 2015 through 2018, even up to this amount of 450. The other piece, and I don't know if Ramona would be best to explain that, one of the benefits of being in the CEP piece is they've changed the requirements on qualifying for free and reduced lunch programs, where it used to be we had to audit about 10% of our students who would be applying. So for instance, we'd take all of our applications, 10% of those would have to be verified. And so we'd have a secretary reach out, or a food service director in conjunction with that would reach out to families trying to verify income, which means that they had to supply the documentation from pay stubs. What other additional documentation there, Marcy? Where was a requirement of that?
In our community, because a lot of people are self-employed, it's tax returns.
Yeah, so they'd have to supply their
Based on
tax.
tax returns. And historically, families don't respond to that, and then they end up getting removed from the benefit of if they were reduced or free.
So roughly around 60% of our population would qualify under the free and reduced lunch threshold. If we're talking round numbers, roughly 60%. Now, as I understand it, Ramona, that has changed from only a 10% that we would have to audit the entire population that would be on free and reduced lunch. Is that correct? Okay. But there is discussion that would potentially be in there. So when we would have about 1,600, close to 1,600 students, and we would have 60% of them qualify. Before we were doing potentially about 10 audit applications. And so if we would correlate that to having to potentially do all, we'd be doing 960 audits for students that would be qualifying, because that's 60% of our student population. I mean, just again, rough estimates. I realize that's, I remember on doing those audits and getting those numbers on, because I believe it was also assigned on who you had to reach out to, I think, or was it random? I can't even remember how that.
It's historically random.
Random.
It can be error prone, but typically it's random.
Okay. So the burden of trying to audit that number would be significant. And so that's another piece that I think there might be lost in the amount we're saving, because I would hate to guess on where we would find the ability to audit that number of free and reduced lunch applications. And the other difficult side of this that I see is when you start auditing those individuals, people who qualify for it don't necessarily apply because it's in some cases not worth the audit. And quite honestly, handing over my tax return to somebody, I would somewhat struggle with that. But those are the things I think the number and the transfer is really tough to correlate after COVID, when we had free lunches and who would take advantage, especially when we're dealing with the cost amount of each meal, because that's significantly gone up in relation to our expenditures also for just even providing those meals. Even if we just look on the expenditure side, not on the income side, that's drastically increased. I would guess. I don't have the exact numbers, but I'm sure it has, based on what we've been buying.
And I would just venture to say too, I don't know how we can put a cost on the readiness to learn. There are so many kids that this is the only meals they get. They get breakfast and lunch because they're at school. And we know that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I mean, the basic needs need to be met in order for a child to be ready to learn. And so I don't know how, I mean, further down in the agenda, we may be able to save money in some other ways, but I'm not willing to cut this to save money in order to jeopardize any student the ability to learn and to be ready to learn and to come to school in a safe environment and have and be fed. It just, they simply, that's just a simple fact. It's the only food that sometimes they get.
Do you know where the 70-some thousand extra meals, I mean, do you have an idea like what age of kid, or is it breakfast or lunch, or we've served 70-some extra thousand meals year over year? Where did those go?
The report that I have is month by month. Ramona, do you happen to know which school saw the greatest increase? Yeah.
Yeah, I do have it, separated month by month. And so, looking at it, I mean, I can tell like Lincoln Elementary lunches increased by 2,006 meals, their breakfast increased by 9,500 meals. Trail Elementary, their lunches increased by 3,975. Breakfast increased by 5,564. TMS saw an increase in lunches of 2,571. Breakfast 4,103. THS had an increase of lunches from 3,411. Breakfast, they had an increase of 4,625. East had an increase of lunches of 3,058. Theirs is not divided by age group, so I can't tell you specifically where it comes from. Breakfast, an increase of 5,832. Lingle-Fort Laramie had an increase of 5,299 lunches. Breakfast 6,937. So I kind of looking at them, the ranges, I mean, are smaller. Comparison, more lunches 580, but their breakfast increased by 1,717. So we took those different measures, different things at different schools to try to work on ways to increase participation. For example, at THS, we moved the breakfast to the front door, so it's easily accessible for the kids to have it, so that they didn't have to go to the cafeteria. We have different measures at different places, increasing rapid modes where kids can potentially take rapid lunches at lunchtime if they were leaving campus, so they would still have the ability to have lunch. So it kind of just started.
Is there any further discussion?
Trustee chairs, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So this is Lena Moeller, just for purposes of Zoom. Mr. Kramer, is this something that the board considers every year?
Yes, we have to consider this each year, actually in June, and I've been getting emails since about, I think April, when they were, the Department of Education was asking if we were considering continuing this, but we wanted to make sure within the budget and in the preliminary budget piece Marcy was working on, but it is a yearly approval process.
And so with that, the thing that I would offer is that we, as a board, look at this every year. I would disagree with the statement that this is bleeding us in any manner. But if that is the sentiment, we are allowed to look at this every year and make the decision every year. This is something that I am just astounded by that we even discuss, given the fact that we are feeding kids for free. Like, of all the silly things we spend money on throughout the school district, this is one of those that I feel as though is imperative for these kids. And I am strongly in favor of continuing it for as long as we can financially sustain it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Any
maybe just have a hand to indicate, yep. To indicate, just so we have a, yeah.
Opposed? Abstentions? Did we have?
So it was, yep, 5-3-1.
Okay, motion carries. We had 2 opposed, 1 abstention, and 5 in favor. We had 3 opposed. I apologize.
1 abstention.
It's 9 o'clock. I can't do math this late. So it was 5 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 abstention.
Yep.
Motion carries. Item 10.4, consider approval of purchase exceeding 5,000 for the renewal of District Microsoft licensing. The recommendation is to approve the renewal of District Microsoft licensing from SHI from July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026 in the amount of $42,912.62 from our technology budget. Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. 10.5. Consider approval of purchase exceeding 5,000 for the renewal of Power School licensing. The recommendation is to approve the renewal of Power School software, hosting, maintenance, and support, and hosting SSL certificate for the 2025-2026 school year in the amount of $21,948.95. This will be from the General Fund Technology. Do we have a motion? Second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.6, consider approval of purchase exceeding 5,000 for the renewal of cybersecurity training licenses. The recommendation is to approve the renewal of Ningeo Prodigy Plus licensing agreement with Ningeo in the amount of $14,318.40 from General Fund Technology. Do we have a motion? Second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. 10.7. Consider approval of contracting for residential student placement services for 2025-2026. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Lake Mary Center Incorporated to provide residential and educational services, including extended school year services for student number 0681 from July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026. Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.8, consider approval of contracting for autism and behavior consulting services for the 2025-2026 school year. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Brooke Carson LLC for autism and behavior and consulting services from July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026 in the total amount of $50,000. This is from IDEA, I can't do Roman numerals right now, VIB funds.
IDEA 6B funds.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Do we have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.9, consider approval of contracting for deaf and hard of hearing services for the 2025-2026 school year. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Access to Learning Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services, LLC, for deaf and hard of hearing services for the 2025-2026 school year from July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2026, not to exceed $22,000. This is general fund special education reimbursable. Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.10. Consider approval of contracting with Goshen County Construction for the LaGrange Kitchen renovation project. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Goshen County Construction for the LaGrange Kitchen renovation project to start in April 2026 in the total amount of $585,004.77. This is a major maintenance fund purchase. Do we have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. 10.11, consider approval of renewing the district property liability and vehicle insurance premium for 2025-2026. The recommendation is to approve the renewal of district property liability and vehicle insurance premiums from July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026 with the school risk retention program in the total amount of $1,029,165. This is a general fund purchase. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
Any discussion? Yes.
Do we not have bid process for insurance? Do we have, or is it, or do we just continue to review the design insurance group?
Mrs. Cates, would you please answer?
Madam Trustee, members of the board, school risk retention does a bid process of which we have taken advantage of. I think it's very important to notate this sounds like a lot of money. The reason for the dollar amount and the increase, number one, has to do with the market and insurance in general. You know, even though maybe we're not seeing the hurricanes and some of that kind of weather, it's being priced as such. The other thing is that there's a 5.5-year look back period. And in that 5.5-year look back period, we had a substantial fire at the Southeast Egg Shop. And so that is drastically affecting our insurance premium. We had just gotten out of the look back period, if you will, from a major hailstorm that replaced all of the roofs in the district, and then we had the fire. So we're about halfway through that look back period. From a liability standpoint, we are very low risk, not much for claims, but I was sharing with Mr. Kramer, when I look at what we received in compensation and insurance proceeds versus what we've paid in premiums, the math is there. There's a total renewal of where multiple parties, multiple insurance carriers are asked to price it. And when I have local entities question me, I feel very strongly that if we weren't part of this insurance pool, we probably would be uninsurable. No.
I noticed that the Copenhagen firm is the attorney group. So if we would ever have an issue between us and the self-insurance, what would be standard? One of their members actually insures us as well. We come for us. What's that an issue there?
Scott Colpecti is contracted by school risk retention to litigate any insurance claims that may be needed. And Scott Colpecti through Copenhagen, Caith, Kitchen, and Colpecti does also serve as the school attorney for many districts. What happens if need be is either SRRP would seek out a secondary attorney to litigate the claim, or as a district, we would seek a secondary attorney dependent, but he would not do both. Correct.
And there have been, and I don't know if this is a good comparison, but and I can't remember the exact reasons, but we have been then provided other representation at different times for different things. There's an attorney out of Sheridan that has also worked on different pieces with the insurance. If I remember correctly, within the last 3 years, I can't remember the specific situation, but those also occur where we've worked with secondary attorneys for those reasons of any conflict.
I have a follow-up question for that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if we ever wanted to seek outside legal counsel aside from Kolpicki, we are free to do so at any time, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.12, consider approval of intergovernmental agreement for school resources officers. The recommendation is to approve entering into the intergovernmental joint agreement with the City of Torrington and the Torrington Police Department to provide 2 full-time school resource officers as prevented for the 2025-26, 2026-27, and 2027-28 school years. This is a general fund expense. Do we have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion?
I would just point out that we will have another one for LaGrange Southeast at our next meeting, just so everybody is fully aware. This is the Torrington one. And there were some changes, and I actually, and if you don't mind, I'm actually going to answer it before I ask the question, if that's all right. So the changes that we've had increased. So in the previous agreement, THS, we had 50% of the salary for the SRO, and that was shared with Torrington Police Department. And then the initial for Torrington Middle School was 25%. Now in this new agreement, that would change to 50%, which is accurate because we kind of we had not in the initial one had an SRO specifically cited for TMS. We didn't know if we were going to be using them at all that much. And so it was considered floating. What we found in the last 3 years, we use it equally as much, that position at TMS as we do THS. And so sharing that cost 50-50. And then also prior, there was no overtime. Now there is overtime potential if there is needed that is added to that contract. You're welcome.
Any further discussion?
What do we do in Lingle?
So Lingle, there is a town police officer, but we do not have a specific SRO within Lingle.
Vice Chair, but yes, Trustee, sure.
LaGrange and Southeast also have SROs, just not within that same capacity. The other piece with Lingle that we would want if we would ever enter into an SRO agreement is specific time spent with on campus. And that's what we're receiving at Southeast and LaGrange, even though we have a partnership with the Goshen County Sheriff's Department and those different because they don't have a entity within either one of those communities, but they specifically have time with on campus. And that's been something that we would want to make sure that either office hours and those types of things, not necessarily floating piece. Rule. Gotcha. I don't know. I'd only be speculating. Yeah. No, exactly. It's a good question.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.13, consider approval of authorizing district business manager to pay fiscal year-end bills by June 30th, 2025. The recommendation is to approve authorizing the district business manager to make payment of all fiscal year-end bills no later than June 30, with information presented at the Wednesday, July 16, 2025 board meeting and budget hearing. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Just a question about why this is necessary. Haven't we already authorized you on a monthly, as we go every month, to pay the bills?
Go ahead.
That's a very good question, Trustee Goulart. What we have in policy is that bills not be processed unless or without approval of the board. We do have the ability to pay reimbursements and utility payments if needed. But when we approach the fiscal year with our audit, it's important for the expenses to be reflected in the year in which those expenses were tied to. And that's why we sometimes have chosen to have a special meeting, which becomes very cumbersome just to approve bills. So it's become customary for the board to recognize that some checks will be written, and then you'll see them on the 16th, but you'll see them after they've already been processed and remitted.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.14, consider approval of revisions to District Policy 3641, use of school district vehicles after school late busing, as presented on first reading. The recommendation is to approve the revisions as presented on first reading. Do we have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? I need to slow down for the lag time.
I
Motion
apologize.
carries.
I'm really slow on the mute button.
You're all right. I'll talk slower. It's getting late. I'm trying to go quicker. Did I say motion carries? Item 10.15, consider approval of revisions to District Policy 4240, classified staff leaves and absences, as presented on first reading. Recommendation is to approve the revisions as presented on first reading. Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Based on their chart. So prior to I get, but, and then it says the remaining PTO will be accrued in the first week of January. So during the school year, sorry, this is for the second year. If applicable to their employment status PTO, what does that mean? Will be allocated at the start of the fiscal year.
Mrs. Laura, would you like to take that one, please?
The intent with PTO is classified staff receive and certified staff also receive 11 PTO days a year. Or the intent is that it's prorated if they're hired after. So it's language to allow for probation of the PTO. Maybe don't use what you're say to us. We can use that. It was presented on first reading, and so the policy committee will take a look at it again, and we can make that adjustment in the next policy.
How often are the staff updated like these changes? Do you feel pretty confident that the staff feels confident in knowing the rules, or they kind of just confused until they break their leg and then they're like, oh crap. Because I didn't understand my benefit. That's right.
Communication has already started. The salary relations committee is where that's where those things are discussed, and so now what the is doing is acting on the recommendations of the salary.
And then Lorene also sends out those policies after board approval and sends them out to staff. So they are aware which ones. But I am not going to say that it is well read by all employees at all times and they're well versed, because there are situations where there are situations where it happens just like you said, they are unaware.
Hopefully they watch our board meetings. Thank you, Mrs. Lara. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.16, consider approval of revision to District Policy 4150, certified and professional staff leaves and absences as presented on first reading. Recommendation is to approve the revisions as presented on first reading. Do we have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.17, consider approval of revisions to District Policy 5112.20 homeschooling and retitled to participation and access guidelines for home-based private school and education savings account ESA students as presented on first reading. Recommendation is to approve the revisions as presented on first reading. Do we have a motion?
So they're all part of the policy, even though there's administrative regs and exhibit, you would approve it as a group.
Thank you. And thank you for the clarification. Do we have a second? Any discussion?
Yeah, on page 120, down at the bottom, it says home-based students who participate in an ESA will not be eligible to participate in activities that require course enrollments and yada, yada, yada. I don't think I could support passing this as it stands, just because we're splitting the ones that home-based students that have an ESA away from the ones that do not have an ESA.
So here's the challenge. We can't get paid for students to take classes if they take an ESA. So if they're a home-based student that does not receive an ESA, then we would receive ADM for that student taking that course. So like right now, we have Valley Christian students, we have home based students taking a combination of choir, band, all of those. If we don't become right, and there could be some changes that we're finding out additional information as this gets answered. The way I understand it right today, which could change tomorrow because every day seems to have new information on it. In order for us to share ESA dollars, we would have to become what they call an ESP, which is an educational savings provider. Now, the piece within that legislation that makes me very, very hesitant to become an ESP is if we can become an ESP partner, we have to, in that highlighted area, we would have to ensure that all home-based students that we would partner with would have the curriculum meets the requirements listed above, that we would be saying that, yes, even though we're only partnering for choir, I would have to say that the home-based student is getting all of their other statutory requirements in curriculum without having the assurance from that family. And that becomes I wouldn't be able to assure that, because again, if I'm going into a home-based education system, I don't want the oversight of the district on some content areas. That's kind of the entire reason to go into a home-based system. And so I would not have the oversight and be able to ensure that statutorily. Now, in saying that, there's another part that there's two different interpretations. The other interpretation is that school districts do not need to become an ESP to partner with families, but can partner with ESA families and then charge tuition for that specific course. Now, if that were the case, which I am perfectly fine in doing and partnering, I want to make sure that everybody knows the cost that they would have to spend from their ESA. So right now, and I don't know the exact figure, I'm just for round figure purposes, around $7,000, a little over $7,000. If anyone has the exact figure, please correct me, is what an ESA will be encapsulated for an ESA recipient. If we would go and let's say, well, you know what, I want to collect an ESA, but I also want to take band at TMS. So then we'd look at our tuition for what we receive for one student. And the tuition that we would charge for an out-of-state tuition or any other is for all 8 classes a full day is $20,371. If we go one class out of 8, we would take an eighth of that tuition, which would be for the year to take one course would be $2,546.37. And so that's what we would be taking from an individual's ESA to take one course. Again, I am more than happy to partner if that is the way that the Wyoming Department of Education allows school districts to participate and cooperate. But that is a big chunk of someone's ESA for one course also.
Would that be possible to put that wording in here?
Well, and this is first reading, and so if we find out, and again, we can, however we want to do it, I'm perfectly fine with, because I know it's amazing the amount of information and interpretation, and if you've been following this with the Wyoming Department of Ed, I don't know all the details because I'm sure it's challenging at that. It's probably challenging at the local level to get any straight answers. And if I could have assurance in that way, I have no problem adding language that if, and we can add that now, if school districts do not have to be an ESP, we would welcome partnering on a tuition basis with ESA recipients, if that would assist the board in looking towards this policy. Because I love the partnership that we have right now with Valley Christian. I love the partnership that we have with some home-based families. And unfortunately, this is getting in the way of that. And that's scary to me. That something that has kind of been sold as this great, great thing might not be that great for many of the families that were receiving it. Because again, I appreciate that partnership we've been able to have over the years.
Correct me if I'm saying this wrong. I haven't followed this as closely maybe as I should have been, but I just recently found out that in order to get the ESA, you have to provide the curriculum that you're providing to your student to be reimbursed for that curriculum, correct? So it's not just a check for a certain amount of money. You have to, so that would fall in line with that. Well,
Correct.
I would think.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why there's confusion as to whether we have to become an ESP, because the ability to supply a more or less bill is something that school districts, we haven't billed for services in the past or billed for tuition. We've been supplied through funding formula and all of those things that districts, we don't charge individual families for different access to different courses. But I'm more than happy to add that language if that would assist, if families who are receiving the ESA and school district does not have to become an education service provider and be able to allow courses on a tuition basis. I'm fully supportive of that, because that would line up to what more or less we've been doing for the past umpteen years.
Yeah, I think that'd be better, and it opens up a lot more doors that way for everybody. A lot more options.
And hopefully by the next month in our second reading, we'll have confirmation one way or the other.
Thank you. Trustee Sharp.
Is there anything in the statute that says we have to charge? No.
How would we pay our teachers?
And what I'm saying is, we already paid for the building, we already paid for these companies, we already paid. We're adding 3, 5, 8 to the box.
You can't
money-
give them, you can't give them a free teacher, but complain about giving them a free meal. Come on
Right.
now.
Right.
That's the thing, you know?
You don't want to give them a peanut butter sandwich, but you expect the teachers to teach them for free?
I'm not saying it's education.
But that money will be taken out of the recalibration. That money, when they recalibrate the school funding, they're going to take that out of the calibration. So that's not, so we're additionally losing money.
Fine. There's those kids that are in Valley Christian and they have to go to school somewhere.
I struggle with that though, because Goodwill doesn't pay for my child's education. I mean, I'm all for educating children and Goodwill, but when we're talking dollars, which is the focus of this board, and we'd like to focus on that, right? When we have kids homeschooling, which is fantastic and a great opportunity for a lot of students, that's money that's coming out of our district. And so you can't have both.
A family, when you lose a student to something like this, you lose the entire family and you start to lose their friends. When I worked in the healthcare system, when you lost one, you ended up losing the rest of the family and the rest of the family and their friends. And you risk hemorrhaging your system. And I just want you guys to think about this. I know it's tough. We can limit it to one class. They get one. But I know, I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out there because I think we need to think about some of it.
Yes.
Because we're going to hemorrhage this community, and what I don't want to see is our public school system hemorrhaging.
Vice Chair, two things. I was just gonna say, the people that, even though they're taking ESAs, they're still paying property taxes. And still 70% of those property taxes are going to the education system. Also, my understanding is from the Wyoming Department of Education, they are working with the Wyoming School Board Association to make a really simple form for the school and people with ESAs to work together to be able to provide these programs for the.
That was the form I shared with you at the the policy meeting.
Pardon me?
The policy committee meeting, when I shared that form with you, that's the form.
That's the form?
Yeah.
Okay. All I know is that they're working on it together, trying to make it simple, plug and play type thing where it makes it easy for everybody and it's not a big deal to do.
It was, I think, 3-page document that we edited quite a bit in policy committee.
It sounded like it was a lot easier than that when visited with them. So.
If I could just real quick share one unique perspective on this. We homeschooled, I'm just focusing on, and she went home, my youngest daughter, she must have got tired. We homeschooled her through the entirety of her school career, with the exception of her junior and senior year. She came to me and said, Dad, and at the time we had a foreign exchange student, which kind of helped grease the skids a little bit, and she wanted to go with her to school. So she said, Dad, I want to go to public school. Okay, let's do it. Perception is reality. If I had perceived, and this is the danger in having a policy like this where we're excluding anybody. Had I perceived that because I had homeschooled my daughter that there was some sort of a barrier between us and the public school system because of that, real or perceived, my answer wouldn't have been no, it would have been hell no. So that would be my concern, is just not having a policy that creates any perception at all that we're putting up some sort of a barrier between us and families that make that choice to homeschool or go to private school or go to whatever they end up doing. And it's also a revenue stream for students that may end up leaving our district to go to homeschool or charter school or private, or for youngsters that were never in the system to begin with. They're going into pre-K or K. Mom and dad maybe intend for them to go to private or homeschool for the duration, but at some point, one example I like to think of is math. Math with homeschooling was a nightmare I didn't want to deal with. Boy, if I'd have thought, hey, you know what, my kids are taking advanced math in high school, I'll pay the high school to take care of that for me. Why not? So it's keeping those avenues open that you never know might cause a student to say, hey, Mom, Dad, I was taking a math class. I really like the school. Can I just go there all the time? And, so it does create opportunities where we're maintaining a bridge to these students that otherwise we might not get that chance at all.
Is there an assessment component to, I know that they have to present the curriculum, but then to get reimbursed, is there an assessment component? Okay.
Yes, they have to take part in state testing.
And as a reminder, this is the first reading, so we will have time to adjust and revisit this. Is there any further discussion?
I was just gonna say, they are still eligible regardless of an ESA to participate in the sports though.
That is correct, yes. Now, just to point out, and there are a couple of classes, and we did identify that is, and this is national rule. This have nothing to do with local. We have no control over FFA. In order to be and participate in FFA, you have to be in a ag course. And so that is a requirement. That's a national requirement. That has nothing to do with us. And also all state music band and choir. That has to be a course in which you participate in to have that affiliation. And we did identify that on number 11 of the admin reg, just to be as transparent as possible that those are things that are just a little bit slightly different. Now, also too, you may hear about this, and this is important to educate everybody. Because Goshen County does not charge any student for activities, that is the reason that there is not a charge for students who receive an ESA, homebound, or any other entity to participate in extracurricular activities. If Goshen County at some point in time did decide to charge for participation in extracurricular activities, then that cost also would be incurred by any of those other individuals who are part of any other different based education process.
Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Can we raise hands for opposed? Sorry. Should we? Yes, absolutely.
Am I opposing this version?
The first reading.
Is that-
Yes. Yes, yes.
Okay, we're good. Yes.
Thank you. Can we please have a show of hands for those opposed? Since our fun technology doesn't work. Thank you. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.18, consider approval of proposed district policy 4306, anti-nepotism, as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the new policy as presented on introduction and first reading. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 10.19, consider approval of contracting with Franklin Covey for professional development services. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Franklin Covey for Leader in Me professional development services at Lingle-Fort Laramie Middle School during the 2025-2026 school year in the total amount of $14,400. This will come from the Lingle-Fort Laramie Title 1003A School Improvement Funds. Do we have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion?
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to amend the motion that we suspend approval of this item until a representative, and actually there's going to be another item that where I'm going to make this identical request, that a representative from Franklin Covey come before the board and assure us that the professional development curriculum is not going to be in violation of House Bill 147, that as of July 1 will be the law of the land in Wyoming.
So you take a vote on that motion.
We did. So that was an amendment to the motion. And I'm going to need some guidance here with how we handle that. So do we then vote on the amended motion? Removing the first motion completely. Sorry, I'm just looking at everyone in general. Might need to. Why are you guys testing me like this evening at 10 o'clock at night?
So I would say that we vote on the amendment first, have a full board vote on that amendment.
Okay.
And then go back. And then if it is approved, if that motion is approved, then we have the vote for the entirety of the whole.
And if that motion fails, we go back to the original one?
Yep. I don't think you can because really what
We would vote on the
trustee
amended.
Gouillard is suggesting is that we have really a point of order, really is what you're asking.
We have that. Yeah. Not to amend.
True, that'd be
So
yeah.
that's why the first one and vote on. Did I just word it wrong then? I don't know.
Were you intending it for it to be an amendment? To suspend the approval until,
Like offer.
is it the word suspend that's to? Yes, thank you. I think maybe just postpone.
I didn't think of that, so we can table it until.
And change the,
And it was.
we can add the amendment, add the amendment, different wording amendment. Next time, then we vote on it.
But I'm still amending the original motion, right?
Well, you're making a new one kind of.
Robert's rules for dummies.
I think we might need Robert's rules for dummies at this point. Can I ask a question in the middle of this, or do we need to figure out what the motion is before we have a discussion? I apologize, everyone. It is, and that was your intention, was to amend, not suspend. So the amended motion is to table the approval of the contract until a representative from Franklin Covey
Of what?
House Bill 147. Which probably hasn't got gross bill now, but I don't know that number's up to my head.
We know what you mean. I know which one
Okay.
you're referring to.
So that is the current standing motion. Is there any discussion?
My question would be why this didn't come to the superintendent's attention ahead of time to avoid this type of a situation. And I'm not against bringing someone from Franklin Covey, but it would be appreciated if these types of things were brought to the superintendent's attention, or even myself or Ms. Chairs ahead of time, so that we don't have these types of things in a meeting.
Well, for one reason, I didn't know Franklin Covey was going to be on the agenda till we got our packets on Thursday. I suppose I could have called immediately and said, hey, we're going to do that, but yeah, so that's the reason for that. Yes. House Bill 147. It essentially it is in a nutshell, it is the legislation that was signed into law in this last session that requires DEI to not be a part of any curriculum, including in public schools, but in college and university as well.
All right, I have two questions. The first one being, is this time sensitive? If it was to wait till we could get a representative here, would we miss our opportunity for this item?
Mr. Dorby, I know you're still on, I believe. Are you able to comment if the July meeting is enough advance notice, or does this decision need to be made this evening?
I don't believe that this decision would need to be made this evening. I guess just a clarifying question though, too, like the representative that we typically work with, our district coach, is based out of Phoenix, Arizona. So I guess in kindness to her, if we were to approve the amended motion, would it be permissible for her to Zoom in as opposed to flying up here?
That would, yeah, that would be acceptable to me. Well, I don't think her physical presence would absolutely be necessary, just the assurance that we'll be in compliance.
And then my second question was, if this motion goes forward, do we go back and redo the original motion, or are we just done with this item and moving on to 1020?
If this would go through, yep.
Okay. Any further discussion? I guess I would just like to add that we have been working with Leader and Me for 2 years now, an additional year at or at Southeast, and then last year we did it district-wide, and we've already had this curriculum in place. I'm sure that they're well aware, and I would hate to see this program go away. I think it's been very beneficial for our students. Any further discussion?
I would expect that if they're going to give us assurance that they're going to be in compliance, and if they have to do some tweaking to, well, whatever tweaking they'd have to do to make sure they're in compliance, I don't think that'd be a deal breaker for them. So I think they'd be able to do whatever customizing they would need to do to make sure they're in compliance with our laws. I expect. I
And
don't know.
this is a federal law, correct?
No, this is Wyoming.
Oh, this is just a state law? Okay.
Well, it's
Never mind.
the specifics of
Train of
this are
thought was
state.
going somewhere else. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 1020, consider approval of contracting with the Writing Revolution for professional development services. The recommendation is to approve contracting with the Writing Revolution for professional development services for teachers and principals during June 2025, not to exceed $15,750. This is a Y Built Lit grant expenditure. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Yes, trustee Sharp.
Is I never seen an invoice on this. Right, and that, did I get that? No. Missing a letter asking us to approve it. Right, we got paid no face on it.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Derby was So what we do is we take the individuals, so we're basing it on the 15 teachers, and then taking that through there. And then Kevin, do you want to explain how that's kind of built through that?
I couldn't hear, I don't hear anything that trustee Sharp is saying, so I apologize, because her mic is not on. So if somebody wants to repeat what she was asking, that would be helpful for me. Sorry.
Mr. Derby, she was asking about the lack of an invoice and how that number was figured.
Oh, gotcha. So, the Writing Revolution does just, the Writing Revolution does just a very standard amount. It's like $1,050 for each person that is trained. And so, but they also do like some additional discounting depending on like each specific course that they put in. So like, for example, if you have like 2 or more people, it's like a 10% discount. And then it just varies from course to course, totally based on the number of people. So essentially what you have there is the very worst case scenario, as opposed to trying to get like an invoice. And honestly, um, summertime is difficult and it's like herding cats. So I cannot tell you how many times we've had to switch courses because um, different teachers have said like, oh, this came up, I want to switch. So it's just easier to go with the maximum amount as opposed to trying to get an invoice that may not be entirely accurate. So hopefully that will suffice.
Thank you. So this would be like our not to exceed. So it will not be more than this, but it could potentially be less than this amount.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're gonna do something with my mic, please. Because I don't have a mic.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think if you want to use trustee Alexander's, I think for right now, I think.
Share for now.
Perfect. That'll work.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 1021, consider approval of contracting with Zern for license renewal. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Zern for the renewal of supplemental access to Eureka Math K-8 curriculum in the amount of $12,500. These are Title I funds and curriculum department funds. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 1022, consider approval of purchase of Study Sync novel sets. The recommendation is to approve the purchase of grade level novel sets from McGraw-Hill for the Study Sync English Language Arts curriculum in the amount of $19,804.19 funded through the Wide Built Lit grant. Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? It is creepy quiet in here right now, guys. I think trustee Mueller left because of all this reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 1023, consider approval of contracting with Renaissance for license renewal. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Renaissance for the renewal of 1,540 licenses for the 2025-26 school year in the amount of $17,647.25. These are Title I funds and from the curriculum budget. Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Madam Chair, this is going to be that second item I told you would come up, so I'm glad we went through the motions the first time. So I would make a motion to amend the motion on the floor to allow for us to table this item until a representative from this company can come before the board, either in person or via Zoom would be acceptable, to assure us that this curriculum is compliant with House Bill 147.
I know we just did this, but do we need a second to the amendment?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I think we're going to get to the point of where if we need to have a person for every purchase to come tell us whether it's legal or not, we're going to need, I'm going to need to know that well ahead of time, because that's gonna take a long time. I mean, it's perfectly fine. If we need that assurance, but it is, I mean, we have how many purchases under this? And it's either gonna be that you're gonna have to have the idea that the superintendent and curriculum director have knowledge of current legislation and would be following the ideas laid out there, or you don't. I mean, it's gonna get,
Mr. Kramer?
yes, sir.
I went through the entire list of all the purchases we're making. These two circumstances were the only two where I felt like there was some additional assurance needed to be had. So this is not, I don't anticipate this is going to be the norm. We've gone through a lot of approvals this evening where, like I said, I went through all of it. Been several long nights. So these two, just because, and actually the second one, more so than the first, there are some details where if we're not clear on where they are, the services and the curriculum and the products they're providing for us, we would not be doing our due diligence to make sure that we are living up to our oath where we agreed to follow the laws of the state of Wyoming. There's enough question mark there that it's not an unreasonable step for us to take. But to your point, yeah, that would get old real fast. And as thick as this agenda is, I can tell you right now, those are the only two where I feel that's going to be necessary. So that's a pretty good percentage.
Mr. Derby, can you speak to that? Have you vetted these products? Have you reviewed the curriculum? Have you worked with these vendors? Can you speak to that to give us some reassurance as a board?
Yes, I actually did want to provide some context to this. So, in regards to Renaissance, Renaissance is the vendor that you got a lot of data from earlier this evening. Like, we contract with Renaissance for their STAR assessments. Historically, we have contracted with a Renaissance for AR, which is actually not part of this contract. The only change to this contract, different than previous years, is the addition of a SEL screener. That SEL screener in the past has been through Pearson, which we will no longer be renewing in the upcoming years. Additionally, because of a previous state law, and I don't have that in front of me, but it went into effect at the beginning of the this past school year. Every parent, when they register their child for school this fall, will essentially have an opt-in form with the exact questions provided from Renaissance on the SEL screener. So I guess basically every parent that wishes to not participate in having their child screened for SEL would have that opportunity to do so upon registration. And there's not like a curriculum per se provided with this. Like, the counselors may access some SEL lessons, but to say that it's like a curriculum in the sense of like ELA is a curriculum or anything like that, this is more of like a screening service both for math and reading, and then in this case, SEL. And I guess for the acronym, sorry, I should maybe explain it. Social emotional learning, sorry.
Dang acronyms. Oh. Any further discussion? And so to clarify, oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
I was listening to what Mr. Derby was saying. We're purchasing 1,540 licenses, but it sounds like the parents can opt out. So are we purchasing licenses that we're not going to be using?
Mr. Derby, can you speak to that, please?
That could in fact happen. Some of the licenses are I don't have the quote exactly in front of me, and flipping back and forth right here is kind of difficult, but I'm going to say ballparkish. There's probably in the vicinity of 700 or 800 licenses for STAR tests, and those would be like our academic tests. This past year with our SEL screener, I want to say we had in the vicinity of I don't know, maybe 50 kids, maybe district-wide opt out. So not a huge portion. So I would assume that we would use most of those licenses. I would certainly hope so.
Thank you.
I was just gonna ask, this is an opt-in though, instead of an opt-out, is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's the way it appears. Essentially, there's a list of forms on the when parents go onto the website to register, and this would be a form that literally they would, I believe it shows up without having it right in front of me, and I'm certainly happy to show that to you next time. But it appears as a check box, I believe. I'm quite certain opt in, but I'm not entirely sure at this point. So
I believe it's opt out, Mr. Derby. I
think it's
can't.
opt out.
Yes.
It could be. I'm not, like I said, I'd have to visit with Dustin, and we can certainly provide that for you at the next meeting if that's helpful, or even between then if that's helpful.
I just want to make a comment about some of the concerns tonight. So I can't speak to the content or how well these things align with House Bill 147. But, and I know that when we were talking about, the access to individual classes by some of the people with the educational savings accounts, that the comment was made, well, this is education. So the beginning of this meeting, we went through all of that data, right? And a lot of the concern was the culture, right? And yes, those numbers are education, right? But what we determined was that, like, sometimes it doesn't matter what the student knows. If they're not taking the test seriously, or if they don't have like the social emotional skills or the ability to stay awake or to focus on taking the test rather than being hungry, like they can't perform those skills. And so I understand that this is a concern about the law here, but like these things are related to education. So to say that school meals or social emotional learning or whatever, the leader in me, like taking pride or being a leader or all of those things, right? The skills that we're learning have nothing to do with education. That's a hard pill for me to swallow. And so I guess I wanted to make that comment that if we can't support students emotionally and physically, they're going to have a hard time educationally. And personally, I don't want to be sending my own children to a school district that doesn't prioritize those things. And so I also, well, yeah, I'll end it right there. But anyways, that's the comment I have on some of these concerns.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Just to be clear, what are we voting on?
Right.
Oh, thank you. A minute ago, I was going to remind you what the amended motion was, and then I forgot. So the amended motion is to table the approval of this contract until July, when a representative from Renaissance can speak to House Bill 147. Good? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
You want opposed?
You want the force or against?
Okay. All those in favor, show of hands, please. Okay, so we have 3 in favor. All those opposed? And Lena?
Me as well, Madam Chair.
Okay, so 3 in favor, 5 opposed. Motion fails. Me. I did not. I am also opposed. So for clarification, so now we go back to the original motion. So the motion currently on the table is to approve contracting with Renaissance for the renewal of licenses for the 2025-26 school year. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Let's do hands just to. Opposed?
Aye.
3 opposed. So we have 6 in favor, 3 opposed. Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, item 10.24, consider approval of purchase of Lexia Learning Systems licenses. The recommendation is to approve the purchase of 550 Lexia Core 5 licenses for elementary students from Lexia in the amount of $19,250. This is Title I and Title something else. VIB funds. I need to go back to school and learn my Roman numerals. Holy cow. 6B. Perfect. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. 10.25, consider approval of purchase of math curriculum materials. The recommendation is to approve the purchase of Eureka math curriculum materials for grades K through 8 from Great Minds in the total amount of $36,751.42. This is a general fund from curriculum textbooks purchase. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion?
Madam Vice Chair, I do have a question for Mr. Derby, if he's on. I would,
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
okay, I just have a couple of questions. I was talking to a few people that, friends that are teachers. And, is this an online program or is there a mix of online and in-house?
So the Great Minds materials, essentially, it is a mixture of both. To answer your question directly,
Yeah.
like almost all of these publishing companies now, the consumable package comes with a digital component. We from time to time, and you'll see maybe just a few elements of that in there. We do an inventory at the end of each year, and then kind of look at projected numbers going forward. So when you see like the total cost, it might say like modules 1 through 6 plus digital or something to that effect. That does include that component, and then in a few instances, it's just like there's just a handful of student books for like a certain module is a part of that quote.
Okay. The other question I had is there, I understand that this program used to anyway come with a homework workbook.
So yes, so the first year that we purchased the Eureka Squared curriculum for grades, I want to say 1 through 5, I believe, only. There was something called an apply book. We actually do have quite a few of those in storage at the just down the hall from where you're sitting, because a lot of those did not get used the first year that we had those. So we did kind of survey some teachers and said, are we using these? Are we not? The overwhelming response was no. We did purchase those again for 1 additional year for the handful of teachers that did want them, but there was no additional requests made. I guess with that being said, I probably didn't ask, but we do have a pretty good stockpile down the hallway from you, like literally shelves full of books that were returned to Central, not being used. And we do from time to time use those for kids asking for additional help, or if families want those sometimes. We've also used those too to fill in some foundational holes. So sometimes our title and SPED teachers will use those because since it's an aligned curriculum, they can access some foundational skills that like work towards the grade level problems and skills that they're working on in any given grade.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. 1026, consider approval of contracting for district professional development services. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Crafted Consulting LLC for district professional development services for the 2025-2026 school year in the total amount of $93,400. This is Title II and School Improvement Funds monies. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I have a question about this. So what, my understanding, so are we still using PLCs? And how do Lingle and Fort Laramie and Southeast participate in that? And then at what, does this just work, does this program just work with principals and instructional coaches, or do teachers benefit from it? It's $2,788 per day. That's 33 and a half coaching days. That's a lot of money. And I am a little bit hesitant to, I just feel like when we were talking about food, I would rather put that money towards feeding kids than training. So I just want to know how this works, how the PLCs work and all that.
Mr. Chairman, you want to kind of elaborate on some of the thought and goals behind the utilization of Crafted Consulting?
Sure. Can I ask, or can I answer the first question first, Trustee Steinbach, in relation to the PLCs? Is that okay?
Please, yes, sorry.
So in relation to the PLCs, like we used to have a district-wide model here for PLC work and typically referred to as collegial work. The last couple of years, we've made a shift to try to do that to the best of our ability at the building level. And one of the reasons why, just so that we're all speaking the same language, there's 4 PLC questions. What do we want kids to know and be able to do? How do we know when they can do those things? Like that's basically the assessment piece. And the last 2 questions are very, very, very difficult to answer at the district level. It's what do we do when they do know it, and what do we do if they don't? Those have to be answered at the building level. And so because of that, we've shifted our PLC model more back to the buildings. When Breeze is here, she is working with principals and instructional coaches, and she is out in buildings meeting with individual PLC teams. Specifically, if you were to look at her schedule, if this proposal were to go through, she kind of has it mapped out up through about December or so. She's spending about half a day per se in each of the buildings, and she's also doing some pre-work with instructional coaches and myself to support that work when she's not here, and also kind of as like a train the trainer model, so to speak, in regards to having the ability to have coaching and support when outside consultants are not here. To give you a little context of why we're consulting with her and bringing her in, her school that she led for a number of years is considered a model PLC school. Just this past year, they were actually a National Blue Ribbon school as well. Some of their YTOP scores are consistently in the 70 to 80% proficient range. And then their ACT scores upon doing some of this work and doing it successfully, probably similar to ours where they were when they started this work, and are now consistently up around a 21 average for all of their students. So that work pays off. It will pay huge dividends. And she has a lot of credibility as far as to bring in that piece of expertise. I think the other thing I'd like to point out too, she also does work with Solution Tree, which is another national company. And from time to time, we've contracted with them. Crafted Consulting is actually a business that is from a former curriculum director in Sheridan. His name is Mitch Kraft. That's hence the name Crafted Consulting. Breeze working through this company as opposed to Solution Tree. I understand your reservations about the expense, but it's probably about half of what it would be if we were contracting her through Solution Tree. So even as hefty of a price tag as that is, it's probably half price as to what it would be if we contracted through a different vendor, so to speak. And then the last piece, these dollars, because of the fact that these are Title II dollars primarily, these have to be spent on professional development. These are federal funds that are more or less specific to that purpose. And so our hands are kind of tied a little bit in how we could spend those for other things.
That's all I want to know about.
And one thing to add, and I hate to belabor this, but this is one of those education things for everybody. And I know most of you guys know this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. So when you look at the cost also and where it's coming from, using those dollars, we have to use those dollars towards professional development. And so I don't feels like you'd said, referencing taking money and putting it towards meals or anything like that. There is a correlation, but there are also these pots of money that have to go towards these items. And so that's why it helps with this. The other piece that I want to talk about too is the PLC piece in that question. One of the things that we've really focused on, and especially we've even just more or less designed our entire calendar around trying to support PLCs. And by seeking this out and Kevin with that priority, we would be, if we didn't provide the proper training, we saw really good increases this year in the PLCs, but we have a ways to go. And PLCs look different in small schools. Breeze Daniels wrote the book, literally wrote the book on PLCs in small schools. She's the author of that book.
One other piece, if I can add one last thing too, while I'm thinking of it too, and to Mr. Kramer's point, like these dollars have to be used for this purpose. They also have an expiration date. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but some of these dollars do have an expiration date of September 30, because this is still some of last year's money. We've been pretty judicious with how we've spent our Title II dollars in my short tenure in this role. So that would be the other purpose of this is not going to like bankrupt us in any way, shape, or form. Like this is one fund, at least presently, that is not in a severe dire straits kind of a situation.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 1027, consider approval of offering an employment agreement to Andrea Wunewald as a district occupational therapist for the 2025-2026 school year. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We are on to item 11, board topics for discussion. Does anyone have anything they would like to share?
Celebration committee is June 17th and 18th in Casper, and then after that, the next one will be September 4th and 5th, also in Casper. This is a recalibration is really a difficult concept to understand. Not that going to the meeting you'll understand it, but it's good information to have because it's going to really impact us in the next couple of years. The calibration of what our budget is. And it's going because of the reduction in property taxes, it's gonna go down. And it's also gonna go down because of the ESA dollars. So I would highly encourage everybody to be a part of that, or at least to listen in. You could join by Zoom, or you can go to the meeting. Zoom in, because I just think it's really good information to have. And like I said, I don't pretend to understand it, but I think as a board, we can be as educated as possible. That's the interest of budget.
The information is our attention, you know that, sure. That's how I would love to listen.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think you are getting notification on some of those from the WSBA. If you look in those emails, but it's good to always, because I can miss them too. So it's not a problem to send them out, but those have really good information on the recalibration stuff.
Does anyone have anything else? The two items that I had written down, we had discussed the possibility of doing a work session with Sue Baelish. She was the one that does like board development. We talked a little bit about it at the last meeting, and then I believe Trustee Mueller sent some more information out to the board as a whole. So if that is an option, I don't know if anyone wants to make decisions or dates at this time of night. And then the other work session that is going to need to happen is our board evaluation work session, since we did not get to that this evening. I would also like to possibly float the idea of postponing the superintendent evaluation that was supposed to happen after this meeting, since it is currently 10:30. You can eat pizza at 10:30 at night? Oh. So just some ideas. If we want to look at dates, I know summer is hard for everybody, but I do think, I mean, we have to do the evaluations. And then whether or not the board would like to pursue working with Sue Baelish on board development.
Trustee, or Madam Vice Chair. Yeah, I gotta get it right. I will encourage on the Bellish, I think is.
Bellish? Is it
Bellish?
Baelish?
Yeah,
Bellish.
that she is the lady that Tony and I sat in on and Casper for our, wasn't it? Yeah, that was her. She was excellent. She did an excellent job in new board training. So,
Good.
yeah, that was her.
Okay.
Yeah,
Would you like to pursue doing that in July?
July's tough for me, but I mean, it's only one day, right? One afternoon.
Trustee chairs, I believe that Ms. Bellish wasn't available in July, so we
Okay.
may need to postpone it just a little bit.
Okay, so let's maybe decide on evaluation dates in July, and we can
Yeah.
revisit Sue Bellish at the July meeting.
Yeah. There's, Madam Vice Chair, there's also a legal seminar coming up in Laramie, from what I understand, in September, that we should be keeping in mind as well. Oh, it's August? Okay. Just keep me honest. But I think that would also be a very interesting program.
The administrators and I have attended that in the past. They do it every other year. And we do that for kind of our beginning of the year piece. And so, yeah, if any board member is interested in that, it is really good. It's very pertinent information on the legal standpoint. The other one, I'm going to jump ahead, but it goes right into this on 12.2, the fall regional meeting. I've attended each one of those. Those are really good too. They're quick. We drive up. If anybody wants to ride along, go up to Douglas, have a meal, and get to know a lot of other board members in the region. And so it's very beneficial. And I know that's September 3rd also, but that's really good too, to get some opportunities to learn some things, and then also get an opportunity to visit with your fellow board members too.
So are there potential dates? Could we combine a work session to do the board evaluation followed by an executive session, or vice versa for the superintendent evaluation?
I like that idea.
Do you want me to send out a poll? I can send out a calendar poll.
Yeah.
Okay.
'Cause my brain can't handle trying to.
No,
figure
that's
that
what I was worried about. So I was
Perfect.
trying to help you out
Okay.
there.
Thank you. And then our next regular school board meeting will be on Wednesday, July 16th at 6 p.m., as well as our annual budget hearing. And I think we are adjourned.
Do we need to give back the packets that we had?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Just